2022, and we've just begun at 1:08 p.m. I'm required to recite that today's meeting is held virtually pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff and our public may participate in person, via phone, and video conferencing. We are also providing live audio and video streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment or to fill out a speaker card and come and comment in person. We actually have seats now out in the boardroom for a public audience. All information regarding participation in this meeting can be found in the meeting agenda on the district website at www.ebparks.org. It's important to note that no formal action is being taken at this study session. It's a workshop study session, special board meeting. Items requiring formal board action will be referred to a subsequent board meeting for consideration. We will be taking public comment on matters not on the agenda at the end of the meeting. We will take public comment on matters on the agenda after the staff presentations and after the board has had its opportunity to ask questions and make comments. We will then turn to public comment on matters on the agenda. Do any of my colleagues have any questions on these proceedings? If not, Madam Secretary, please take the roll of the board.
Thank you, President Coffey. Director Waspy.
Here.
Director Lane.
Here.
Director Wieskamp.
Here.
Director Corbett. Director Eccles. Director Rosario.
Here.
And President Coffey.
Present.
And General Manager Landreth.
Here.
General Counsel Burgo.
Here.
AGM O'Connor.
Present.
AGM Corrigan.
Here.
That is the end of the roll call. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So we'll move right to our first agenda item this afternoon for this workshop, which is Closing the Gaps, a regional trail projects update. And Deputy General Manager O'Connor will open up the session.
All right. Good afternoon, President Coffey, members of the board. Jim O'Connor, your Deputy General Manager. I just wanted to say a few words before I pass it off to Sean. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, President Coffey, for pushing all of us to have this study session before the end of the year. And I mean all of us. And it was a great effort on the part of many people, including me learning my new role and how meetings are managed when I had this great staff and operations. And then I had to rely on the clerk of the board to pull everything together. But I want to thank everybody. It was a team effort, and we pulled it together. There's a couple of reasons why I think this is important to happen before the end of the year. One is, of course, I'm really glad that we were able to have Directors Lane and Wieskamp join us for this conversation. I think it's really important to have their voices part of the conversation because of their decades of service to the district and their history in trail issues over that time. So it's really great to have them both here for this conversation. The second thing is, we've been going through a process with the public in relation to trails, and we'll go into that today and talk about that. But I think we're really at a critical juncture when it comes to our trail system, our amazing trail system, more than 1,300 miles of trails. The world's changing around us, and we need to really look at how we manage trails and how we plan for trail and trail access. And I think this is a really critical juncture. And so I think this is an important start of a long conversation with the board, but I think there's some urgency around the matter. And I think you'll agree after we go through some of this information today. And also, I mean, most of you get out on our trails, you hear from your constituents. So I think you know what's going on out there in the world. But anyway, I just wanted to really say thank you for pushing us to have this conversation. So it's really important. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Sean Dugan.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for the map. It's lovely.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jim. I thought that introduction was going to be longer, so it took me a bit to get up here. I'm Sean Dugan. I'm the Trails Program Manager. It's great to be here and see you in person. I've been doing this in my pajamas for the last 2 years, so I appreciate being here. This is great. And I have the same format that I'd like to share with you today that we have seen in the past, and it's called a story map. And what this story map will allow us to do is, excuse me, I type this in, will allow us to look at a map, some sort of a Google Earth map, so we could kind of fly around and go to certain places if questions come up that aren't in particular in the packet, but also has some slides included on the side that we can zoom in and get a little more detail on some of these projects. There are 18 projects in the packet and on the map. Apologies, there was a table mishap with the 18th project getting cut off due to a formatting error, but it is in there now. It's included. It's been updated. I don't have a specific, I won't be talking about all of the 18 here, but I have picked out some that have some key updates that I'd like to share with you. And of course, they're all in this story map that you can't see yet because I haven't shared it. So I will do that. And those at home hopefully can see this now. I will. Okay. There we are. And so with that, I wanted to explain a little bit, real briefly, if you look at the way the projects have been color coded in the table and organized in the packet, you'll see 4 categories of projects. And you've seen this before. This isn't anything new, but I wanted to make a little bit more specific to trail projects. So we have preliminary design, we have projects in design and permitting, we have projects that are in construction, and then projects that have been completed. And so for trail projects, what that means when you see a project in preliminary design, it's at the very, very early stages of the project. In fact, it hasn't really maybe even been defined at this point. We're acquiring the right-of-way needed for that project, negotiating with developers to include that in their development, et cetera, et cetera. It's typically the stage that we'll see a preliminary engineering study or a feasibility study completed. And we're trying to produce enough design or define the project enough to start CEQA and even adopt CEQA at the end of this stage. Then it would move into the design and permitting stage, which would extend the design life of the project to 100% design and start engaging with the permitting agencies to acquire the permits. And that's typically when the grant funding pursuit really gets underway, because a lot of grants require CEQA or NEPA to have been completed prior to applying, but not always. And then we will be engaging with the public at that point. And then, of course, in construction, CEQA and NEPA has been completed. The permits may or may not, they should have been acquired, but there's also construction permits that are needed for the actual grading permits, et cetera. The funding has hopefully been secured at that point, and the design has been finalized and it's ready for bidding. And then there's completion, which you think, oh, that's it, that's the end. Well, there's actually sometimes mitigation and monitoring periods for up to 10 years after projects, no matter how big or small they are. And then it takes several years sometimes to close out a project, which is also projects in the completed phase are being closed out in a lot of cases. For example, the Pinole Shores Bridge project took 3 years to close out. It was a $13.5 million project. So that gives you an idea for how long that can go. So hopefully, I know that's not new to many, but I wanted to clarify the stages for the public and for the board before I jump in here.
Okay, so I do have one
yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Do we ever start constructing a trail without having all of the funds in hand and ready to
I
go?
would say no.
Okay,
We definitely start working and looking at the project before we have all the funds. Many of these phases are before, especially the preliminary design and permitting. A lot of times we do not have the full funding to construct the project, but we
Yeah,
don't
but-
start construction until we have the funds.
construction, you've got to have it all. in.
Yes.
For the particular segment.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be many segments of the Iron Horse extension, but we'll go ahead and construct the first one when it's fully funded.
That's correct. If you look at our master plan map, the pink lines are the proposed and the blue are existing, and those pink lines could be one or multiple projects,
Right.
depending on what project we are focusing on, segment we're focusing on at that time. The answer is yes.
Ellen,
Do we have the option, though, to bring in additional funding if we find out as we're working through a project that we may need more? Because
If-
I've seen that happen.
The question is, if we need more money during the project, do we have the option of bringing more money in? Is
Right,
that correct?
We do that. Once in a while, there's a situation where we don't have enough funding to complete the project. And then we come back to the district and make a change in do a vote change in the money coming in.
Yeah, and I would affirm that that's true. If there's changes in the project, especially change orders or elements that arise that we didn't anticipate, then yes, we will return to the board, ask for more money in those cases. And we've done that many times. That Pinole Shores is another example of how many times I think you saw me standing here asking for more money. Yeah, that's correct.
McCosker Creek restoration, the coal mine experience, those repeatedly came back to us
Quite a few.
for more funding.
It might be almost every project. It's so
No.
it's not the goal. It's just, and it's good that you're asking that because I think we should be comfortable with that and expect that almost because the construction is not a clean and cut and dry process. Okay, shall I jump into some of these projects and hopefully I cover some things you already want to hear about, but of course at the end of this we can fly around and figure out what else you want to hear about. So the first one I just wanted to celebrate that the Marsh Creek Trail from Concord Avenue to Vineyards Parkway, as you can see here in yellow. Well, there's two segments shown in here. Please just focus on the number one segment here. It's about a mile and it was constructed as a condition of approval for the Vineyards at Trilogy at Vineyards housing development, Shea Homes constructed. Years and years we've been talking about this, waiting for this to be completed. There was some right-of-way issues that the developer was having. Most of this land that you see here is on California State Parks land, but there's also Contra Costa Water District and Caltrans portions. So it was stalled out in those discussions. But you can see here it travels from Concord Avenue underneath the state highway, which is the Caltrans piece, across the CCWD pipeline. And then most of this is state parks along Marsh Creek. And then it ends at Vineyards Parkway. This project ends and queues up the other project that I'll address is the Marsh Creek Trail from Vineyards Parkway to Round Valley, which we completed CEQA for. And we're working with state parks now to determine how we can move forward with that project. It is not fully funded, but I'll talk more about that later. I wanted to show you a few pictures. This is the newly paved trail. You can see Highway 4 there in the background. And I'm sorry, as I get little, and this is looking south towards Marsh Creek State Park. And this project, this trail will be operated by the Park District. We signed an agreement in 2011, a master agreement. We're currently amending that agreement and some of the language that is unique, I'll say, to this segment of trail. But it has been open to the public. So we're working quickly with our land department to finalize that language.
Sean, could you while this is on our screen, could you show where it currently ends? This segment from Concord Avenue?
Sure. It ends at this, this is an older aerial photo here, but this has all been developed in
Right.
here. And it really ends at a street crossing right where my cursor is. Whoops,
And
that's Vineyards Parkway.
and down a little south of there, is that the Marsh home site?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes, and I
perfect.
think, yeah,
So it currently ends right next to the home site.
it does. Yeah, so moving forward, we'll have to update that signalized crossing there. And I'll give an update on that project in a minute. I have that on my list.
And of course, that's entirely fenced off because the state has closed that land.
It is not open to the public at this time, yeah. But I will say we are actively engaged with the state, and we are brainstorming ways to either open a portion of Marsh Creek State Park or the trail before, but we haven't reached a conclusion. Project number 2 I'll go into is a project, again, we're in the completed portion of the packet, the Tyler Ranch Trail. You may have heard it called the Tyler Ranch Loop Trail, but it is not a loop. So it's now the Tyler Ranch Trail. It's about 1.3 miles of natural surface trail. And I wanted to just share with you real quick some of the equipment and methods that we use to build trails in parks. And what you're looking at here is a bulldozer made by a company called Southwest Equipment Company, but we call it the SWECO. That's the acronym, or SWECO by some. And what you're looking at is a bulldozer with a roughly 4-foot wide blade. And the appendage on the left there is what is called the slope bar. This machine will cut about a 5-foot pathway, sometimes 5 to 6, depending on the dirt and the slope. But as it moves through, what you wind up with is you can see it working here. I'm sorry, I did not mean to do that. For some reason, it's turning up blue. So that's fun. But that's a SWECO at work. Let's skip that photo. We also use mini excavators. There we go. Thanks. For steeper sections or areas where we need to actually lay back the slope. As you can see, this is a very steep side slope. Not every operator is comfortable in this situation. And then we also, year after year, we hire the American Conservation Experience to maintain and mostly build new trails. This was no exception. It had rock walls, it had creek crossings that need to be armored. And here's the crew working on one of those rock walls. They did great work. Unfortunately, in the end, the wall gets covered up with dirt and it's just stabilized and kind of can't see it anymore. Here's an example of the width of the trail that's completed at the end. You see some of the BMPs. We put up some silt fencing to prevent rocks from falling and other debris. But as you can see, no matter what you do when you're building a trail in a park by hand or by machine, it does create quite a footprint. Here's a great example of a finished, it still has the berm on the right side that was cleared up later. So this is sort of in process, but that's somewhat of the example that when we refer to narrow trails, that we construct them with the bulldozer. We don't have enough staff to do it by hand or labor to do it by hand. And then we need to maintain it by equipment. And so this allows the width to maintain the trail in the future and significant room to pass. And then, of course, this is the staging area down at Tyler that it leads to. This project was completed just this last summer, and as you know, it's open to the public now. I just want to thank the Small Trails crew, maintenance, skilled trades, roads and trails crew, American Conservation Experience, my staff, and then stewardship for really all, when needed, flexibility, getting labor out there. It took us 2 seasons to build 1.3 miles of trail and we're working on speeding that up. And we'll probably be talking about that very soon in the new year, about some of the ideas that we have to build trails a little bit more efficiently.
So Sean, that trail ended up being about 6 feet wide with a shoulder on the downslope.
It's about 5,
5.
and the shoulder goes away. Over time, that all settles down.
Okay.
And some of the upslopes comes into the trail. and some of the bank slides out. And it naturalizes and the grass grows back. And then user patterns dictate, where the vegetation doesn't grow. But the bench itself is about 5 feet wide.
Okay, and the views are open and expansive as I remember.
It's pretty open up there. We don't always have the option, as you can, we work with the ground that we have, but yeah, this one is in grassland and some oaks, and it's quite, the visibility is quite open.
Well, that's important if it's being shared by bikes and people.
Yeah. Right now, I don't think very many bikes are out here at,
It's awfully steep.
it's
yeah.
awfully steep. Yeah. And I feel like, sorry, I hit the
Thank you.
laptop is like zooming in and out, and
It's a
there
workshop.
it
Just
goes.
jump in. It's a workshop. Just jump in.
Yeah. workshop.
So, can you share with us some of the things that occur that slow down the work and what you will do to, speed it up?
Well, right now, I won't, okay, since you asked, I'll go into some detail, but I have like a full packet here. So I'll try to do this quickly. Really what it is that you need skilled operators to run the machinery. No operator I've ever talked to likes running this machine. It's very tippy and it's in rugged terrain. So we have a few roads and trails operators that are comfortable doing it, are very skilled at doing it, but we need more. We have a small trails crew, and that should be called the 2 small trails crew, in my opinion, because it needs to be 3 times the size, I think. So we hire ACE and we supplement with other work. And sometimes the staff at the park as well. Those are some of the things that during construction constrain our ability to build large segments at a time. But the permitting and changes that need to occur in the field under the permit, if there's any adjustments or trees that have to come out that didn't need to before, then we have to consult with the agencies again. We have a biomonitor there, and those things can slow the process up as well. And then weather and fire. So some of those things we can control and some we can't. But
Can you take a look at the possibilities prior to when you start, or you just find it out as you're going through it?
I'm sorry. The question was, can we address these issues before we start?
Well,
Is it-
how do you determine whether you can be going a little quicker or not? Because it sounds like that's what you're going to be doing now. You're going to be studying these and figure out if there's a way to do them quicker.
Yeah, well, when I reference that, what I'm referring to is.
You need to repeat the question because I'm not hearing the
Okay,
question.
yeah. Okay, well, let me ask. What was the question? I'm sorry, I can't hear you either.
You were stating that, now that we've done this, you're going to look back at it and see if there's a way to speed up these types of programs.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I'm asking, how did we get there? And what will you do to continue to move quicker on these projects?
Okay, so the question was, how can we speed up the process from what
did
we've
you
learned?
learn from that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And one way is that we are looking at contracting out the construction of these projects with a company that does this work specifically.
Mhm.
And so we've released an RFP and we've received bids back for that. We have not come forward to the board yet with a proposal or a contract, but that's one way. The other is that we already do this, but we are working with we meet with our roads and trails crew, we meet with our stewardship crew a year before we're even in a construction season and lay out what hours and time we'll need. But with staff turnover and other duties, it sometimes shifts, but we're working out. We're not there yet. We're still having those discussions. So I wish I could say it's in the rearview mirror and we're ready to go next year and be quick about it. But nothing is very fast with trail projects anyway. But we'll get there, and I think we'll discuss this. I'll have a better prepared presentation to describe how we will move forward in the new year. But I wasn't prepared today go with that. And we're not there yet.
Great. I think we'll be very interested in that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's move on to project 4. This one's a big one. And this one is 2.5 miles of paved San Francisco Bay Trail at Point Mulate. We are in the final design stages of this. Permits are pending. We have a few projects that Richmond is working on near the beach park that we're working out details on. They're having trouble getting permits for. Once that is completed, then we won't have a gap in our trail. All things we can work out. As you know, the property, much of the property at Point Mulate transferred ownership. And so we're working out the details on right of way to be able to construct Richmond's piece of this trail, which is about 1.25 miles. We are proposing to build this still as one project, and we don't see anything at this time that would prevent us from that. We do feel that we're fully funded, and we're trying to get this out to bid by no later than January 2023. Bids start to, I would say, reduce in quality after you wait too long in the year. But we as of right now, I think we can do it. Just real quickly, the funding strategy here is you have all the sources here, but you have the Park District at first, that's like Measure WW, FF, and CC funding. And we've been successful at receiving those grants below. And Richmond was successful in receiving a portion of the funding from the very same grants as well. And so this project is very supported and we feel fully funded, but we are waiting on the final engineer's estimate. And of course, the bids will tell all. And so this is one of those cases where I may be up in front of you if things go askance, so.
Dennis has a question.
Oh, thanks. I can't see Dennis, so thanks for.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that was my question about the Richmond's portion of the funding, and I see now that you have it all out there. But if there is, you mentioned that and it seems to be the case all the time, if there are cost overruns, is it a what's Richmond's portion is my question. Are they a percentage, or are they going to say, we're going to give you $3,139,000, that's it, you cover the overrides? Do we have any assurances that they're going to come up to the plate and do their job?
Right now, Director Waspy, we have the assurance that we have a cooperative funding agreement that we brought before this board and that they have approved, and we have signed and executed for the amount that you see here. If we need more money, those are conversations we're going to need to have. And it does depend on where the way the project will be segmented is there's a part 1 and a part 2, and the contractor will be invoicing on those separately so that we know what Richmond's portion is to be reimbursed by the grant funding, and we know what our costs are. And so we'll be able to tell if we need more money for either segment or phase or part. But those are conversations that we may need to have. But I as of right now, we feel we're fully funded, and this is enough.
Okay, just a comment. I don't think we're ever fully funded, and there's always overruns all the time. I've never experienced anyone say we've ever gone under budget in anything in this park district. But it's not a criticism, but I would hope that when we plan these things ahead, that we would say you're gonna have a portion of this. We're gonna be partners and have a portion of this. I would like it to be 60-40, a percentage, so that when the overrun does come, there won't be, to suggest we have discussions. I worry about that. I would like to defend the district and have these things taken care of before the overruns start occurring.
Yeah, the good news on this project, Director Waspy, is that the engineer's estimates that we are basing our feeling on that we're fully funded here were based on each segment of the trail being constructed individually. Constructing them together will lead to costs decreases, economies of scale, et cetera, mobility costs go down. And so we actually are, it's helping us feel confident, and it's my job to make you feel comfortable that we can move forward. And I feel we are, but no guarantees.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask you to highlight something? To me, this project exists within a much larger context, and not to diminish the importance of just this Bay Trail across to Winehaven, but I'd like you to highlight the segment of the trail that was already completed, I think a year or two ago by, I think it was Caltrans. Very expensive segment of this trail that will, it did for the first time, allow for pedestrian and bike access from downtown Point Richmond all the way to Stedman. And to me, that's a key facet of this whole process, that the ability to extend the Bay Trail out along the San Pablo Peninsula was made possible through the state completing that segment, which was, as you know, extraordinarily complicated because it used freeway.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That they had to relocate a massive 3 to 4 story wall for that. And I'll add to that it also now extends on the shoulder of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge all the way to Marin.
Right.
We were in earnest trying to get the Point Melate segment of the Bay Trail under construction at the same time as that trail was, so we could see the use increase and get the good numbers and make the case that this trail is the trail across the bridge is worth it. We're a little behind, but such is the case with most of these. But yes, that's true. This is it in green here along the side, and then it cuts onto the bridge here. Our project will lead directly from that down along the shoreline and through Richmond's property and end at the Wine Haven piece here.
So what this all represents is many millions of dollars that have been spent to create public access to the San Pablo Peninsula, both by the state and all these funding sources that we have in the city of Richmond has. And all of this is being done and completed at the same time, as is now well publicly known. The state of California allocated $36 million to this park district to task us with the attempt to acquire this land out at Point Melate and develop parkland. So within that context, imagine all the check marks that greater acquisition will meet, because we'll already have high quality premium Bay Trail creating public access from these surrounding communities, many of which are low income communities and neighborhoods from North Richmond to that specific area around the refinery, near the refinery. Public access will be there, and any parkland that we're able to develop out there will augment that existing access that we're creating, and it should make it all the more easier, for lack of a better description, for us to go to additional funders out there to complete land acquisitions. So this is just exciting as hell, just to put this all together in one huge context for what we are doing for that community in Ward 1. And I'm just thrilled by it. And thank you for the effort of getting this underway so that it will indeed augment the attempts for additional funding.
Thank you. No, you're welcome. And I'm excited too. Let's celebrate when we're cutting the ribbon.
Yeah. Director Lane?
So what you're showing in the map in the yellow color is what is in construction?
Yes.
Okay, so is that the 2.5 miles?
Yes, that is the 2.5 miles.
And that will end, will that go past the beach?
It does. It
Okay.
it will end.
It goes all the way over
To
to
the-
Wine Haven.
See
at the
Wine
other
Haven here?
Side of Wine.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
it goes from Stenmark and then it'll re-meet Stenmark at this location.
And it actually goes through Point Melate, which is, that's the most magnificent and grandest segment of the land out there for the public to have access to. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And it's just going to be
It's
magnificent.
good. There are great views. And I see, Elizabeth, you have a question?
Oh, yeah, so yes to what, on the 100. Okay, there we go. So, yes, I fully agree with Colin, of course, but I also just wanted to draw attention to how the trail that we're building connects with the San Rafael Bridge. And I think that's really important too for public access, because we're not just talking about access to the future Point Malate Regional Park, hopefully, but from the East Bay, but we're also talking about it
Yeah.
from Marin and from, other points.
Absolutely.
So I think that's very significant.
A regional destination, if you will.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, well, we're equally as excited to get this off the ground and furiously trying to get the design finalized. So I'm gonna jump because I know I have an hour and it looks like I got about 15 minutes left. So let's see, permits. I'm going to pick a project that has a great, we should talk about the Ridge Trail from Garin to Vargas eventually. You can see it here in yellow. We are hopefully in the final stages of getting permits for the upland portion of this project. It's about it will open up about 5 miles of public access. A lot of it's on a road, some of it's new trail construction. It will also open what we refer to as the Gelderman land bank property. You can see in this map here. I haven't done this on a laptop before. And you can see that this is in land bank status here. 1.3 miles on existing road, 3.64 miles of new construction, I believe. And I just wanted to say that this is phase one. We're pushing to develop the trail and get that underway with the permits. We completed CEQA and adopted that in 2018. But one of the elements of this in order to open it up to the public is an at-grade railroad crossing of the Niles Canyon Railway. And we've been in years of negotiations and debates and discussions about what type of crossing this should be here. And the CPUC, the county, and the PLA and the Park District have all been, we've been sort of pushing against those three to get a non-signalized crossing here. And we tried our best, but the CPC in the end is requiring a signal at this. It will just be a signal light that blinks. We'll have self-closing opening and closing gates. And we have all come to agreement that that's the safest crossing we can build here. And I just wanted to tell you that with that application process with CPC could take up to 18 months. And we've been working to get that out, and it is being submitted today. So that sounds small, but it represents hundreds of hours of going to the dentist like processes.
Dealing with railroads. Director Waspy has a question.
Okay.
Dennis, chime right in. It's a workshop. You're muted, Dennis.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Sean, for getting that out there. I know it was a terrible thing. And boy, I personally think we were double crossed over this by some of our friends who assured us we weren't going to have to do all this. But anyway, I'm glad it's getting done. When you refer to 18 months, you're referring to the CPC will review the Park District's application at this and make its final decision. Is there any way we can try to influence this along? I mean, get it on the schedule, get it done. Is there any, because there sure were a lot of promises made along the line, and there sure was a lot of anticipation of this great thing to happen. And to suggest that we just send it along to some commission up there somewhere, wherever it is, and hopefully get done in 18 months. Is there any type of influence we can or help we can ask for from some of our political friends down there?
Well, if you're asking me, Director Waspy, I would say that what we've done at a staff level is ensure that staff will not oppose the application during the process. And we feel that we're successful at that. Now it will go into an administrative law judge's hands and it becomes a legal proceeding. I don't believe there's much we can do, but perhaps your colleagues have other ideas or other avenues that could be taken that I don't know about.
Thanks.
We will certainly continue to be creative on it. I mean, my experience is there isn't a whole lot once it gets submitted that you can really do, but we will certainly do everything we can to try to accelerate it.
Thank you, General Manager Landreth. That was a better answer. Here's another easy one. So the San Francisco Bay Trail allegedly to the staging area to Baralesa Street and Martinez is one of the projects that is included in our 2016 amended and restated MOU with the Union Pacific Railroad. Real quickly, I've been telling you we're at 95% design for years, and that's what was on the design plans. But as soon as they got into Union Pacific's hands, they had massive changes that I will say honestly brought us to about a 30% design, asking us to shift the trail to the outer 15 feet and shift it around their signal cabinets, as well as asking for grade improvements to this to the at-grade crossing at Baralesa seen here in this picture. It's really minimal pedestrian and bicycle facility or safety elements at this crossing. And so we, because we're adding a leg to this intersection, so to speak, we are going to have to do these safety improvements in order for them to approve our design. It could add, I think, over $1 million to the project. Right now, we're anticipating this is about 3.3 million. You can see this bridge here that was built in 2003 that's waiting for the trail to come to it. And we've applied for many grants, ATP Active Transportation Program. We're in the second application. It scored much better at a state level, but still did not make the cut. Last time we scored just under the cut for the regional allocation of that grant. So we are hopeful that we will be successful this time because we followed some advice and changed the application and added some elements to that. We are also applying for a consolidated rail infrastructure safety grant, which is for the crossing in particular for safety improvements. And this is included in, will be included in the future RAISE grant that we will submit next year. And right now we're waiting to hear back from the California Natural Resources Agency on the urban greening grant that we applied for and had the site visit recently out there. So we're trying to put together the funding pieces for this. The CEQA amendment and adjustments, the CEQA was adopted in 2003, and we think we can do an addendum to that. But given the design changes and things, we need to take a closer look at that. It may result in us having to do another MND, but we don't know. The mitigation for this project has been completed already, and the permits have expired. We were given permits already. So once we have a design that UP will eventually accept, then we can go forward with the environmental process. So I think we're set back a little bit on this project, but we're still moving forward. And I know you would like to hear about the Point Pinole to Wilson Point project. That's a pretty quick update. It's we're looking at the preliminary engineering and studying the alignment of that and identifying the utilities. We have identified an abandoned pipeline that none of the utility companies seem to own, and so they won't claim ownership of it. So we're digging in, and we may be reaching. Our consultant has reached out to the CPUC already, try to get to the bottom of this. If that pipeline can be removed, we are going to throw a party because it's the only element of the project that would prevent this alignment from coming to fruition. This is a big trail project. There are boardwalk structures similar to Dotson Family Marsh, and wetlands and neighbors and sea level rise, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and the railroad. So, but this is underway. We think that we need to determine the design before we can engage with the public, and we'd like to do that in the next year and verify this pipeline. If this pipeline can't be moved, et cetera, then it changes the design, and it might change how we discuss this or how we present this to the public. So we're waiting on that, but please be on the lookout for a public engagement process in the next year around this trail.
Thank you. I want to comment on that. If you could keep it up just a moment, because this to me is critical to return on investment. In other words, we've spent very large sums of money with our funding partners on the Bayshore Park Bridge, on the
Lone Tree Point.
Lone Tree Point extension that was just completed a couple of years ago. And then, even go back to the eminent domain proceeding that got us through from Biorad.
Right.
Lots of investment in Bay Trail. It is absolutely perhaps the most beautiful segment of Bay Trail in the 9-county region. It's just pure waterfront on that magnificent San Pablo Bay there. And this is the last gap. This is what will allow folks to get from Point Pinole all the way up to eventually Benicia
Mhm.
because of the connection. The county is commencing, I think within the next 3 years is the plan. It's got its funds to extend the Bay Trail from our park in Rodeo all the way up to Crockett and the bridge. And that continues to be their plan. And I think that's going forward. So that's that smart street conversion of one of the lanes of San Pablo into this. So this is going to be an incredibly important and popular segment of the Bay Trail. And we just have to close that gap. It's, without that gap being closed, it forestalls that kind of volume and utilization. And I have to believe it will, again, check a lot of boxes on funding. If you look down at where the trail ends at right in front of our Atlas Road entry to the park, to Point Pinole. Yeah, all of that is Amazon distribution centers.
Mhm.
But
Lot of jobs.
Whole Foods. UPS has a hub there next to the railroad and the railroad. Oh gosh, a whole bunch of distribution centers, and there are more coming because of the Atlas Road connection to Highway 80 there.
Mhm.
So, all day and all night, these delivery trucks are coming in and out of there, thousands of jobs right there. That gap will, we can say with a straight face, be a major commute route that will open up the entire San Pablo Bay shoreline, especially with the dense housing that Hercules is creating along that shoreline. People will commute to all those jobs and have, relatively for the Bay Area, affordable housing all along those shores. Low income neighborhoods in Montalban, Tar Hills, and North Richmond
Rodeo.
are right there. So you're talking about low income neighborhoods, very diverse neighborhoods that will be granted access to the Bay Trail there. It ought to get funded.
It's a cornerstone. It will open up almost 30 miles of continuous Bay Trail from Benicia to Treasure Island. And so, I should mention that I almost moved on, that we did receive $500,000 in STMP funding from West Contra Costa Transportation Advisory Committee for this project. And we have that in hand. That sets us up very nicely for the next phase, which would be the design and permitting phase.
And there's got to be, federal and state active transportation money for this trail. It's just, it's begging it.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed. Yes, you're welcome. Okay, I've got 2 more I'll go through. Yeah. It's a workshop. So I just want to say it's been a pleasure working here under your leadership, Director Lane and Director Wieskamp. And so I have to talk about the Iron Horse Trail at your last trail workshop. I want to share with you, okay, so this is a long story, but in the end, we have about 3 more miles to connect the Iron Horse Trail to the San Francisco Bay Trail and the California Delta Trail from its current terminus at Marsh Drive in Concord. You can see it here in purple as proposed. The yellow, why this small yellow piece is highlighted, I'll tell you in a second. Okay, the laptop's fun. All right. This again. What you see on the left here is, well, let me back up. Okay, so in about 2018, Contra Costa County Water Conservation and Flood Control District ran a community engagement process around their Walnut Creek restoration plans, which are north of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad tracks that I will zoom into here. Their plan is to widen the channel to increase flood capacity, in short. All of the neighbors were in there, including the park, were in the room during those conversations, including the Park District and other advocacy groups. As a part of this, their project, the Iron Horse Trail and public access to their project, once it's complete, was a key tenet of that project. And so during that process, we had to come up with, okay, where's it going? As quickly as we possibly could so that they wouldn't design their restoration project to preclude development of the future Iron Horse Trail on their levee. And so talking with all the landowners, there's multiple toxic waste sites out here that are not abandoned, sorry, are no longer active. And there are active landfills out here as well as other ownership by the county. And so during the creek restoration, a portion of that has begun. They've moved the levee and a portion of it. We are currently in discussion with one of those property owners who is said, give me a draft easement and we'll go over it and we'll sign it. So we're already making the necessary steps forward to engage with those that were in the room during that process to try to acquire the right of way. For the whole 3 mile stretch, there are multiple bridges that will be needed in this, and one in particular is what I would call the son of the Pinole Shores Bridge, because it's over 1,000 feet long and it needs to go over a railroad track. So again, that project was 13 million. Add a couple more bridges and a couple more miles, you can get an idea for how expensive this endeavor will be. But we do have $1.6 million in a mitigation fund. As you can see in the writing here, it's 1.6. It was 1.6 a few years ago. It's gaining interest. One of the key parts of this project is getting to the west side of Walnut Creek. The county is currently replacing the Marsh Drive Bridge, and it's in this picture. You can see this is the new bridge, and it's set to be complete in 2023. I've walked across this bridge, so I think it's very, very soon. You can see our 2-rail fence here where our trail used to go right through here and end. The agreement we have with the county is that they would include a 10-foot wide pathway. You can see it on the left, to the left of the rebar here, on the bridge to get us over to the west side, and then we would take it from there. As a condition of that, Caltrans is paying through the Highway Bridge Program, is paying for those improvements. And I'll go back. And as a condition of that, we need to extend the Iron Horse Trail in some fashion to a logical terminus within 5 years of this bridge being completed. And so my proposition is that we release an RFP for a consultant to start looking at this one. It's a 0.2 mile segment from its current terminus where the bridge is being built up to Imhoff Drive, which has some bike lanes and is on the countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. And it is a logical terminus. If we have enough money to go farther, we will investigate that as well. And I wouldn't run a feasibility study of this nature without confirming our route elsewhere as well. So the scope is still being created, but I just wanted to give you an update that we do need to extend this. It looks to me that we have sufficient funding to do so. And we are in active conversations with landowners to get the right of way for the rest of the trail to hopefully make it to Waterbird Preserve. And I believe that's all I had on that. Any questions? You're welcome. And then last but not least, we have a little known trail in Wildcat Canyon. And I want to give an overview because there were several comments that you received on this project. And I just wanted to quickly address the scope and the nature of this project. One of the conclusions that we can always make and that we have been making over the years is that bikes on trails doesn't work everywhere. And in fact, most people don't want to share with bikes. Separating bikes is an option, is a good option. It's also more sustainable and cheaper by the foot to build a new trail than it is to continually close, restore, enforce. That just keeps going and going and going, and we just keep sinking public funding into doing all that. So by foot, if you run the numbers, it's actually more sustainable and cheaper. So we were approached by multiple individuals in the Northern California National Interscholastic Cycling Association and from the Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay to propose that we investigate the possibility of a bicycle flow trail within Wildcat Canyon. This park receives a lot of riders. Some could be hundreds of trips per week in this park. And they're riding on 1.5 miles of legal narrow trails. The rest are roads. A lot of those narrower trails, frankly, just were not designed, and like many of our trails, were not designed for that use. So this proposal was brought to us, and also with that proposal came a commitment to helping maintain a trail of this nature, to help restore other trails that have been created illegally in the park, to spread education and trail etiquette education throughout the user group, and volunteer hours to help maintain trails in this park. This would also remove bikers from the rest of the trails, which seem to be bothering other users, we're hearing, and provide that facility that gives the purpose that, and the reason it's sustainable is because they'll stay on it. One of the reasons. So through community engagement, we believe this will activate the trail users to self-regulate and educate their user groups. And we hired a consulting firm to do initial studies, environmental studies out here, plant surveys, wetland delineations, et cetera. And so far, we have seen nothing in the results. They're under review right now. They haven't been released yet. Our stewardship department still needs to complete the review. But the initial summary is that there's nothing that we see in this corridor that we picked a very large corridor. You see the trail alignment in yellow, but that's not a final alignment. Nothing is showing us that this isn't a possibility. And so what I'm recommending is that we move forward into the next steps of a projects like this and do more studies and CEQA and public engagement around it and start looking at this as a project. And I should say that there has also been a suggested donation that is a possibility to not only build this, more than enough to build it, but also to help maintain and restore this trail and other trails in the park for many years. So that's why this is in the list. It's now kind of moved into that it's still in the preliminary project phase. So we don't have CEQA, we don't have a scope, we don't have a firm alignment. I'm suggesting that we continue to explore this until we reach a point where we either determine that it is possible or that it isn't possible. But we don't know that now unless we go farther.
Well, and one piece of context I'd like to put this in is the fact that I believe this board was first exposed to the concept by Scott Bartlebow at one of our public meetings. I think it was last year. Scott appeared and presented the map and the concept. And I think we all got a feel for it maybe a couple of weeks before that because we were sent a webpage that was dedicated to this concept. And so at that time, I know I and others on the board turned to basically Brian and said, can you folks determine preliminarily whether this is at all viable? And that is dependent on whether there is sensitive habitat at this location or can a flow trail system be created without danger to sensitive habitat. That was the one thought that crossed my mind when I heard it. And we did ask staff to start looking at this. So this isn't out of the blue. This came back to us at our request at this very moment in time. And the larger context from even there was that folks like myself and others have viewed the Crockett Hills flow trail experiment of 2014 as being now, an experience we have been able to view for it's 8 years, and it's been largely successful if you define success as guiding mountain bikers to this one area of trails, natural surface, narrow trails designed for bikes. And that it has lessened conflict because people like myself, we just don't walk on those trails. We go around them. And the bike community loves it. They take an active part in the improvements and the maintenance, building little bridges. They do all sorts of work. And they have successfully prevented bootleg trails from developing out there because they've developed a culture around these are our trails. And, you know, there are no more bootleg trails. The only downside to this has been, because people are using it all the time, is equestrians aren't as much because of all the bike traffic coming up from Crockett. And I think that can be highly remedied when we have the Cummings Skyway staging area built, the new parking lot right off of Cummings. You won't have as much bike traffic going up narrow trails from the bottom of the hill up to the tunnel under Cummings Skyway. So I think that can help. That definitely that staging area is very much needed for this. So I'm looking at the Crockett experience and thinking, you know, if it can work elsewhere, that's part of the way we meet this demand. Wildcat is particularly appropriate for me, if possible, if it continues to prove feasible, because of all those school kids and their coaches that are from schools in those hills, in the hill areas adjacent to Wildcat and Tilden. And we have correspondence from a couple of fifth graders, I think, today, talking about the need for this kind of access. And that does alleviate pressure on narrow trails that are not being lawfully used by mountain bikers, and the creation of bootleg trails. So if possible, we'd like to replicate the experience with Crockett Hills and not actually provide more access for bikes on narrow dirt trails that were not designed for bikes throughout the Tilden and Wildcat system. Again, subject to maybe our figuring out some alternative use possibilities through the Briones pilot. So that's all the big picture here. I appreciate you bringing it back. I know we all are, because we need to keep moving on trails issues, which is the next half of our workshop. And I'd like to see us look at Contra Loma and see if this type of flow trail system out there, because it's reclamation land. I think the original, LUP for their envisioned more recreational uses at Contra Loma, be it disc golf or, maybe even this would be very, very, and again, relieve pressure on Black Diamond, where people are using narrow dirt trails not designed for bikes. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And I should mention I used to bring about a 30 project list to this workshop. Those 30 projects, the additional 12, they haven't gone away. They're just in some different state. But I will say that Contra Loma, we have taken an initial look at it, but we should look at it a little more closely. But before I will not talk about any more of these projects. I will open it up to the board to ask questions about specific projects in the packet.
Yeah, now
real quick and to have a discussion if
that's
you'd like.
what I'd like to do. I don't know how real quick it's going to be.
Yeah,
but it is a workshop.
It's your workshop.
We might go.
And I as long as I don't get blamed for going too long, I always do.
I promise not to blame you. We'll blame Jim.
Sure.
It's convenient. Yes.
Share coffee, do I have the floor?
Yeah, she has to turn on her mic.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
There we go.
Here I am. So I was just saying that I wanted to chime in on the Wildcat Canyon Flow Trail as well. I think it's very important that we can accommodate all of our users in ways that don't hurt other users. And so I think the potential for this Wildcat Flow Trail to do that is very strong. And, and actually Dee and I went out there with some of the groups that were proposing that and with staff, and it, it looked really good. And I'm glad to hear that staff's review so far has found no sensitive natural communities, no rare plants, no other problems of that sort. So that's all good. And so I'm very interested to see how this goes along. And I also did want to say that, it's not just the teams from the hill schools, because it's actually teams from, Richmond, El Cerrito, Berkeley. It's very, these are kids who bike regularly and really don't have the access that they need. I mean, they go a lot to Tilden, but there's not a lot for them. So I think that it's important to consider that as well.
Director Lane, and what we want to do is bring it back to the board for questions and comments, and especially for any of the projects that Sean was forced to kind of skip over real quickly, so we can go back if there are any questions on those. So board, Director Lane.
Is this Wildcat Canyon trail currently a trail, or is this a new trail?
This would be a new trail, very close to what is called I refer to it as the West Meju Trail. But I have seen it labeled as Leonard's Trail, but there's an existing road that it would cross a few times, and so there would still be an option here for folks to take the road down if they wanted to, but the flow trail would sort of be offset from that road. But it is it's proposed as a new construction.
And then I have a question on what figure it is that you use when you say you're going to build a new regional trail, per mile. And when you talk about doing a natural trail per mile, is there some general figure that you use?
It's been estimated to be roughly $8 to $10 a foot for a new natural surface trail to construct, unless there's walls and bridges and crossings and other material that raise that price. So we typically use that estimate. I'm really referring to a policy paper that I wrote in my master's policy class when I got my master's a few years back, where I did analyze the cost that it was and the time that it's taken rangers and our police to enforce and close trails in our parks, and versus the cost that it took to build the trails in Crockett Hills. And if you look per foot, if you break it down to be able to compare apples to apples, if you break it down by foot, it's actually it's cheaper to build a new trail than it is to continue to beat our heads against the wall. Sorry
Yes,
for the
we see
colloquialism.
this with historic buildings too, it's cheaper to do a reproduction, than say a building. But do you have like a mile figure?
I don't have that for you now, but maybe let's connect offline. I can share with you what I do have.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I understand what exactly.
But I
you're
think
asking.
we have, so when we've talked about the Iron Horse Trail, people will say, well, how much does it cost to pave a mile? And we have some kind of figure we've had in the past on that.
And it's doubled and maybe even tripled. But yes, we used to say $1 million per mile.
We used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's we've built a half a mile for 3 million. So but that's for paved. It's much more difficult to estimate the cost of narrow,
because there's so many
elements. Yeah, it's really hard. And we've been asked by other agencies. We're not the only agency that has difficulty coming up with these estimates. California State Parks does have a training on estimating these. It's like an entire week. I have not taken it, but yeah, they're very diverse and complicated.
Yeah, thank you.
Other board members?
Anne Camp would like to say something.
Anne, you go ahead, then we'll go to D.
All right. First of all, I certainly support investigating this flow trail. It makes sense to me. I would like to remind the board that several years ago, Philip Schultz Trail was promised, and the family involved, Philip's family and friends, worked very hard on funding. I see that it's anticipated for next year. And so I hope that's going to happen. It may not be a bridge, but when you have a situation where the friends and family and everybody have worked hard to help make it happen financially, and it will be well used in the Pleasanton Ridge, I would certainly hope we can do it. But Sean, I want to tell you that you are the best multitasker I have ever seen. And the way you can answer questions for all of us is just incredible. So you've got my appreciation.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Dee?
Yes, thank you. Yes, you do cover the whole district. So this is in regard to number 7, which is Sibley. And these 2 trails pretty much started a discussion in the formulation of the Trails Easier Working Group. So has there been any determination, any changes, amendments made to those 2 trails, or because I think there were well, at least one of those trails was controversial as to is it going to be multi-use, or is it going to be single use, or is it going to be downhill or uphill only?
Okay, yes. No, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to be very clear. These are 2 completely separate trails from the more controversial trails that led to the formation of the Trail User Working Group.
Okay.
These were permitted as a part of the creek restoration project, and the permit is currently active. And as I say in the summary, there's some restoration and realignment of the Ridge Trail, and then a connector of the Pacific P Trail below. The trails that you're referring to were the Blue Eyed Trail and Meadow Barley trails.
Okay.
And those are not being proposed, or they're not permitted, and more discussions are needed.
Okay,
around those
great.
trails. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we get appraised of any changes to that one. And then regarding our really hard access along the estuary in Oakland. So
Oh, would you like me to go there?
yeah, 16.
16.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Director
I have
Corbett
my
as well.
table of contents here, but yeah, well, this right now, I will say that the ball's in our court. We are working with Hanson Aggregate, which is, I'll zoom in a little more. What this is it's a very short 0.2 mile gap from our Tidewater Boating Center along industrial uses to High Street is the definition of this project boundary. Right now, we're talking with the initial owner here. That it's run by Hanson Aggregate, owned by a different owner now, but we have reached a point where we are finalizing an easement through this property. And the owner is also going to reconfigure the conveyor belt and their operations
Wow, that's great.
to accommodate that. But they have taken that project, and they have a lot of other properties, so they're prioritizing that, but it won't hold us back from getting the right of way.
Great.
We have more discussions to have with the second property owner here. Is it also a distribution, gravel distribution plant? And as a real key update for you, Director Rosario, and everyone else, is that we've been working very closely with Oakland to try to close these gaps. And so Oakland set up the meeting and has been working with us to meet with the merchant mariners in the area, that the guys that drive the big barges through this channel. And the lead is the Coast Guard. And we met with them in the last summer, and it was very, very clear that they're not going to support and will oppose any narrowing of this channel to allow a trail under High Street and maybe even Park Street. We initially thought that the Coast Guard gave the thumbs up, but they clarified that was a preliminary review, not the real review. So I will just say, in short, we need to find another alternative to get up to the at-grade crossing of High Street, which is possible, but it requires a much different conversation with that property owner.
Okay. Yeah, we should pay attention to, I mean, those bridges are both those bridges are twins and they're both very old.
Right.
And if there's going to be any upgrades to those bridges, we should pay attention to that because there might be some opportunities to do a trail underneath.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
the attention and detail that you're doing. So thank you.
Dennis?
Yeah, well, first off, Sean, thanks for you and your staff for all you do. It's amazing the work you guys get done. I'm referring to number 15, the Guerin to Pleasanton Ridge Trail, the Chenard Winery connection. I was wondering, I know it's going to be a long time off. I know it's planning, but could you kind of describe what the plan is? Because I'm worried, or my concern is I'm worried about that beautiful potentially, and I don't think it's a slam dunk that could be considered on any historical register in the world, the Chenard Winery. Do we set aside a fund to do routine maintenance there? Because like we always say, if it's 10 years off, is the building going to fall down, and then or is there a way to preserve that as we're planning? And is there a schedule in place of saying, well, we'll probably do a land use plan amendment for that whole area? I think, it's been brought up a couple of times. I mean, well, for one thing, there's really nice buildings there that I would like to see preserved and maintained. And there's also vines there. There's only a couple of rows of vines left, but what's the status? And are we going to let them just go and plow them, or can we maintain those? Because there is some historical advantage to doing that. We talked about, I think it's a great opportunity for us. Jim, you're stepping to the podium. Thanks. I'm going to quote you. You said, this is a crux deal we got going on here. We've got 1,300 miles of trails. Things are evolving, the way we use trails, the way we recreate. I'm suggesting that a way station of the Chenard Winery in some form is one of those ways we could evolve and change by having that there as a east-west corridor, an entrance from all the folks where everybody lives in Hayward and the east side of the hills, or pardon me, the west side of the hills, and making their way to Pleasanton Ridge and having a nice little way station at the Chenard Vineyard.
Jim O'Connor, Deputy General Manager. So, Director Waspy, I don't have any details on the budget that's been put aside for this new property. I know that there was some work done in conjunction with the previous landowner, the Chenard family, on the vines in terms of what we were going to keep and maintain from the original number of vines. So I know there's been work done on that, but let me do some background and get back to you on that in terms of the buildings. I'll have to get back to you offline.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I just want to point out, I don't want to sound like I'm a one-trick pony here, but just down the street, the Westover Winery is for sale now. And I don't know that we want to go into the winery business, but it is a key property in my opinion.
We've been in the farm business for a long time, so.
Okay.
Our beer brands are doing well, I understand.
That's very true.
And Director Waspy, this is Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails and GIS. I just wanted to speak to the question about the land use plan for Chenard Winery in that area. We are now kicking off doing the baseline studies to understand how to essentially connect the trails from Guerin through Chenard across Palomares Road and connect into the Owens property. So we just recently opened up, as was mentioned, the Tyler and Robertson property. And then of course with Chenard coming on, that's really kind of a critical link that allows us to open up all that. And Sean described the Louis Trail that is moving forward that would connect Vargas to Guerin through the Gelderman property. And then we're now looking ahead to how we could then connect that through Chenard over to this area. So we're not necessarily looking at what the repurposing of the buildings would be at this point. I think we're discussing a number of options of what those would be, but initially looking at how to make those trail connections. And we are doing the initial baseline studies, the CEQA work to understand what the trail work would need to be to link all that together.
Great. Thanks very much.
Director Corbett.
Just a quick question on that. I'm sorry, this is probably not totally on title, but is there any vineyard left at all in that area?
Yeah, that's Chenard.
I know they were taking some out.
They have a small, vineyard there that still exists.
But anything that's within the land that we're taking care of.
Yeah. Yeah. oh,
I
jump
know
in there?
that they
was
were
gonna zoom
taking a
in.
lot of vineyard out.
Hello, Steve Castillo, acting AGM of operations. So your question was if is there anything left of the vineyard over there?
Yes.
Yes, we do have some. So it was worked out with the previous owners over there that they would remove a certain portion of the vineyards. Because vineyards are very time consuming and the vines were very old and past their age.
Mhm.
But we did keep a section for interpretive value. And so what's going to happen is that park staff have been working with Interp and Rec, and we're going to be basically maintaining the existing vines that are currently still on the property.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thank you.
Good idea. Thank you.
Ellen, any other issues? I have a few, but
I was just going to mention if we were looking at the list on this, pretty much nothing's in the district that I represent. Some of it's right on the edge.
Mhm.
But these, so I don't really have a whole lot of projects, you know what I mean, on this particular list. They're all in your district.
well, she's pointing out that her ward, these projects don't exist in her ward.
Yeah.
And I would just suggest to staff that there are probably conceptual projects and maybe some other, it's the nature of Ellen's ward that we deal with on such issues.
Right, I don't think, I just think you're.
Yeah, you don't have a project to come back to where you might have had questions. I appreciate that. For mine, I wanted to address for a moment the indeed projects that aren't there that I would hope to see in near future or something. But I just wanted to mention to you, you're taking notes?
I am. And I'm gonna,
I'm kidding.
I'll take notes too.
So
I just wanted to
this
stop
this
shit
is
so we
this
could-
is my wisdom on where some of these things may want to work themselves onto this list. I want to mention the Antioch Oakley shoreline extension to Big Break that hopefully we're starting to work on. I know the state perhaps is, but this is through the logistics center project out in Oakley that is immediately east of the Antioch Oakley Pier and that little park there. And then I learned a week or two ago, I guess 2 weeks ago, from an Oakley official that the vineyard that is directly across the street from the Big Break entrance on, what is that, Big Break Road? So that vineyard has just had some development plans submitted. In which the suggestion was that we would want to take whatever trail develops in the logistics project through that vineyard to Big Break. So it seems to be that these Oakley projects are ripe for trail planning to get that important segment from Antioch Oakley shoreline to Big Break. The other is just then up the road from Big Break, a little further east, the Marsh Creek Regional Trail extension to Dutch Slough, where it currently dead ends at the intersection of Big Break Regional Trail and Marsh Creek Regional Trail. And I had the opportunity to get a tour around the 1,200 acre Dutch Slough project that the state has recently completed. That trail is there. It's just gravel right now, and it leads to a brand new bridge over the mouth of Marsh Creek, which is rather cool. And it's really beautiful at that point, which is also adjacent to a major new inland pond, multi-acre pond that the state has completed. So that trail seems to be, again, ripe for planning, for getting that extension down to Dutch Slough of that important trail completed with, again, this, grand concept of being able to bicycle from the Delta at Dutch Slough all the way out to Round Valley. Once these extensions are completed. I always in the back of my mind, I thought the state was going to pave that extension, and apparently they're not. So it might be incumbent on our working with the city of Oakley to get funding to just simply pave that trail. It's there, it's gravel. And I've learned that our rangers, our East County Trails folks, regularly go out and inspect that trail and shoo motorcycles away. And so our people are already out there on that extension of the Marsh Creek. So I would hope that that is a project that seems ready for at least seeking funding for an extension. Lastly, I just want to mention, I saw Janet McBride the other day at our celebration for Ann and Bev. Janet is the executive director of the Ridge Trail, as you know, Bay Area Ridge Trail organization. There is a significant segment of the Bay Area Ridge Trail that is envisioned as the Carquinez Strait Loop Trail. And the Ridge Trail folks have very specific plans for it and some areas where it needs to have gaps filled. And one of them is how to get folks from the Ridge Trail through Fernandez Ranch Park, which we are partial owners of, over Highway 4 or under Highway 4, as the case may be. And that's always been seen as a huge impediment. But all of a sudden, we're in escrow now for 500 acres directly north and east of Christie Road, across the street from the entrance. That this new property that we're in escrow on is across the street, I believe, of the Fernandez Ranch entrance.
Yes, yeah.
And there are existing ranch roads there that would enable the filling of the gap, an important gap in the Carquinez Strait Loop Trail proposed by the Bay Area Ridge Trail folks. And that would take people from Fernandez Ranch, where the Ridge Trail now terminates, up to Cummings Skyway through existing ranch roads in that property. And I think that we should be anticipating that escrow closing at some point next year and moving right into how we connect it as Bay Area Ridge Trail to Cummings Skyway. And that's the last one I'll leave it with you folks on projects that might make this list pretty soon or seem to be ripe for it. Thank you. And I will look back to directors Wieskamp and Lane. Ann?
No, I think, again, we keep adding to the list, Sean. Are we giving Sean more help?
Those three were already on the list, but they're just not on this list.
Yeah,
Well,
I kind of suspected.
I think we need to set priorities for Sean. He gives us lots of good information and look to what's realistic. But I really think we need to address the biking issue. And I love the idea of the flow. I think it might be one, if it's successful, we can look at other locations. People who want to do this kind of biking are not going away. We want them to do it safely and the way we want them to do it. So I'll stop with that. But thank you, Sean, as always. You and your troops are out there everywhere. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, I recall when we went through the prioritization process, and a vast majority of my priorities didn't make the list. But so I'm used to that, but we'll mention them anyway. Beverly, and then we'll ask for any public comments on the projects.
Thank you. And I want to thank Sean and his vast staff for their work on
Forgot their names.
trails.
So many, I forgot their names.
We know how important trails are to people. So I hope you enjoy working on it, because people love seeing these trails get planned and completed. And so I'm going to do my broken record thing on a name with a Louis Trail, and that is Harlan Gelderman.
Yeah.
So we this story about how we acquired sort of the Spider Partial up there and how it came out of a poker game, and there's all kinds of fun stories. But Harlan Gelderman when we say Gelderman property, it's Harlan Gelderman, and he was a very prominent real estate person in the Tri-Valley. And his family was the Harlan family, which at one point ran the store out of Mission San Jose after the gold rush. And so when we are looking at names in that area, I would hope that instead of Gelderman, that Harlan would be a name that people would consider. And so I just wanted to pop that back in there. I've mentioned it a few times, haven't I, Brian? And so, but here's my last opportunity to mention it. And it's a significant historical name, and I'd like to see it appear somewhere. I'm not too enthusiastic about Louis as a name, and I know that's a placeholder, but Harlan is a name worth thinking about. So thank you again.
Thank you. No, I think we refer to it as we refer to a lot of our projects and properties by the former owner. It's just a internal sort of reference, but we are not planning on naming the trail the Louis Trail that I know of. I think we know. Thank you. I do want to thank my staff, because I do have two of them, and they're out there showing up with smiles on their faces. And not only that, these projects on this list, it takes a village, and this is a labor of love. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here, because it's difficult to do. And so, but my staff keeps showing up with smiles on their faces, and they're still, running projects to where they become not projects anymore, and they have to move on, that they spend a lot of time on. And so I just want to thank Sean Connolly and Suzanne Wilson, and then all the other departments, the Park District, that are involved in these trail projects, because it does take almost every single element of this district to get these projects done. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you much. So we're going to move in a moment to Jim O'Connor's presentation on the future of trails and trail planning in EBRPD. But I do want to ask if there are, and raise your Zoom hand. There's no one in the room, but if there are members of the public who wish to address these projects, specifically to these projects, that would be appropriate at this time. And if it's more to the issue of trail use, that would be more appropriate at the end of Jim's presentation. So on projects, does Madam Secretary, do we have any pre-existing requests before we ask for Tom?
We do not have any pre-existing on this topic.
So at this point, we just have one hand up. Tom, you want to go ahead? 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Jumped in a little late. I'm kind of filling in for Scott here from Bicycle Trails Council, East Bay. Really excited to hear the developments with the Wildcat Trail. We've been tracking that, and we think it's going to be a really good test case for the district. And I have a couple ideas just to throw out. We always have a hard time getting numbers and quantifying the use. If we could, there are digital trail counters, and I would encourage you to think about, it's very hard to implement when you have a park with 10 or 12 access points, but for this project, maybe getting some digital counters out there before the trail's built. Stewardship days, Crockett Hills, of course, you heard a lot about that. Scott's leads the charge there, and it won't be hard to get stewardship and get volunteers to help maintain this trail if it gets built. And then of course the idea which we have with the city of Oakland, which is adopt a park, will adopt a trail. So some sort of maybe an MOU or something for a 5-year period where we can maintain that trail and show some stewardship, and it helps us connect with our membership as well. And the no bootleg trail comment I thought was excellent. And then I just have one request, which is we did wonder whatever happened to McCosker. We spent a lot of time with the district staff, the planners. We came to meetings. I got very excited about the McCosker Ranch addition to Sibley and the potential for new multi-use trails there, and kind of lost track of it. And I know the construction's been held up there, but I would request that the trail staff, maybe we could set up a separate meeting just to get caught up and to find out the status of that project. Thank you.
Certainly. Amelia? You're on mute, Amelia.
Good
There you go.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Amelia Marshall, speaking on this item as an individual. As regards the flow trail in Wildcat Canyon, the equestrian community does not have any strong feelings, pro or con, but as an individual, I am concerned that there is a very large wooded area that is line of sight to the proposed Mizzou parallel flow trail route and just north of Havey Canyon Trail. The version of this flow trail scheme that I saw would have Havey Canyon be routed uphill for bicycles, and then they could join the flow trail at Nimitz Way or elsewhere. So the concerns are, this looks like prime bird habitat. I wonder if those bird communities have been studied in enough detail. When I was there 2 weeks ago, it sounded like there were thousands of birds nesting and roosting in that wooded area. Would the e-bike noise distract the birds and harm them, cause them to flee? We don't know that, I don't think. And further, because of the tendency for bicyclists to create bootleg trails, it would be very shameful if bootleg trails fragmented that bird habitat. I think that needs to be looked at. I wonder to what extent we've really tested the theory that by building bike-specific downhill trails, it will deter the construction of bootleg trails. So those are my questions, and I hope they can be studied in greater detail before this project is green-lighted. Thank you.
Thank you. And they will be addressed. William Irigi.
Yes, thank you. This is William Uregi with Mission Peak Conservancy, and speaking on, this is in reference to the Wildcat Trail. You know, it's interesting when you look at Briones, which went from 16 miles of illegal trails to 30 miles of illegal trails. You know, this is at the same time when Crockett was developed. So Crockett was built in 2015. We're told that there are no bootleg trails in Crockett now that the bicyclists have taken over. I actually filed a public records request of the Park District and asked for a definition of how many bootleg trails exist in Crockett, and I was told there's no record. I asked how many bootleg trails exist in all the parks. There's no records, no responsive records. So if you're not measuring what you can't, what's there, then how do you know that there's no illegal trails? I mean, it seems to me to be a pretty simple equation. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you can't manage it, it doesn't exist. That's putting your head in the sand. So if you're building bike full trails and you're doing it on the premise that the biking community is going to support you, I'm sorry. I just went up Pleasanton Ridge, the new park that was opened here, the 18 miles on the Snow Ridge. I took a friend of mine, we went to the top, we met 10 other hikers on the trail, we met 5 bicyclists. 4 of the bicyclists were on e-bikes. E-bikes are not allowed on that trail. I'm sorry. Was there any enforcement? No. Is there any enforcement in East Bay Regional? Yes. 120 tickets in 44 months across 73 parks. That's 0.002% of all use. So here's the bottom line. If you're going to open up more parks for biking, which you appear to be doing, if Wildcat is going to be a design that you're going to implement across the parks, then let's deploy, let's use Briones as a measure. Let's find out what's going on in Briones. Let's do the pilot project and see if the biking community actually supports your efforts. Are they going to close down the 30 miles of illegal trails when you open up some 8 miles of new trail? Or are they going to continue to use the other trails that exist today? And honestly, you don't appear to have records today. So hopefully at the end of that pilot project, you'll have an understanding of what actually they are willing to commit to providing you in terms of support. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Part of the deal is going to be that we recapture net bootleg trail habitat over the creation of new trails, so that the net impact in Briones ultimately would be to recapture more of the bootleg trail then we actually create new trails. Then that would be the deal with the biking community that we would hopefully succeed in with their adherence. If they don't adhere, if they don't buy into that new culture, it's not going to work. I can speak just for myself on Crockett Hills. I frequently hike Crockett Hills and have ever since the flow trails have opened, and I haven't noticed any new social trails being created. I think some of those trails that have been there very long may not have been actually planned trails, but they've been there forever as far as I know. And certainly since the flow trails has come into being, it's not that large an area. So, you know, I've been all over it and I haven't noticed any of that. I notice it all the time at Briones. Every time I walk a trail out in Briones, I see some new bootleg trails either created or in the process of being created. So it's Crockett is something I think we know a lot about, if only anecdotally. But in any event, let's move to our next workshop topic.
Thank you.
We were planning to take a break at 3.
Good.
And would it be a good time for you to take a break now?
Now or 3, whatever works for the grain.
You want to do it now?
Why don't we do it now since there's a natural
let's
break
do it.
here? Let's just do 10 minutes because we are way over
Well, that's
our
probably
time
going to
allotment.
run into 15, but we'll try. How's that?
Hey, I got a, you know, one of these things I can learn how to use after a year. Off camera, off tape. And Director Corbett is back. So let us know when we're live.
And the streaming is live.
All righty, welcome. We're back into our next segment of this workshop, which is entitled "The Future of Trails in the East Bay Regional Parks." This is very important. I'm very pleased we're at this point toward the end of the year. As senior management knows, when I took this leadership position, I said one of the things we really got to pursue, especially with the new volumes created by the pandemic period that we went through, is all the panoply of bike issues that are all coming together and accelerated by the new volumes, that we somehow had to get our hands around it. And our general manager just went beyond the call in tasking now Deputy General Manager Jim O'Connor with this project, with this global issue that is confronting us of bike and trail use, or trail use and bicycles in particular, among other issues that were addressed by the TUG and now the PAC. So we've moved it from the TUG to the PAC, and Jim is here today to summarize basically where we've been and come from, and his own vision of the immediate next phase of planning and perhaps master planning for trail use. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, President Coffey. Let me do my screen share here thing, get us started. There we go. Oops. It's this one. And I can go back. Excuse me. Oops. We're going through a whole bunch of things here. Excuse me for 1 second. I need to get back to the top here. Okay. All right. There we go. Excuse me, it seems to be thinking. There it is. Okay, great. Yep, it's not showing. There we go. Okay, a little delay there. Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's been a very interesting last couple of months for me as I've embarked on this new endeavor. And I have to say, it's not so much my vision. It's been a really great interface with the folks in ASD and Lisa and Brian and Sean, and Matt Grawl. Obviously I've been interfaced with them for the last 11 years, but not to the degree that I have recently. And so it's been a really interesting journey thus far. And I think that it's been very educational. I've been involved in trails for years in my 40 years in parks, both building trails and maintaining trails and being involved in planning functions, et cetera. But this has really been an interesting endeavor. And I think I want to be clear about, because Jim Landreth asked me, she says, well, Jim, what is it you want from the board? And so I think I'm going to start out with that, is that where we're at is we've done, I think, a pretty good public process trying to gather information to see really, we've had conversations with the board about what we think is going on trails and some of the challenges, but we really wanted to go back to the public and get their perspective. And the really interesting thing is we seem to have some alignment between what we're seeing, what the public is seeing, and some of the ideas about how to handle that. And I think that's what we're going to address today. And the third leg of this is really getting the board's input on this and your perspectives on things. And then what we'd like to do after that is spend the next few months putting together what I am calling, this is just my words, is a Trails Program strategic plan. It's like, what do we do now? Where do we go with this information? We've talked about what the challenges are, how I think we can meet those challenges. And then we have to put together a plan of action that says, okay, what are we going to do? And then that translates obviously into budgets and staffing and those things to address the issue. So that's what we hope to get in the long run, is your input. It's the third leg of this. And then we'll use that to produce a strategic plan, which is what we would use then for budgeting in future years. So with that in mind, let me move forward. So why are we here today? And I just answered one part of that question, but also the world has changed. And the pandemic accelerated some of that change that we've seen. So remember, there was a time when you could go hiking on a weekend and you get out there by yourself. You'd have what they call solitude and time in nature. Remember that? And look at that picture down on the lower right. You could actually find campsites. Remember in California, there was a time when you could go camping. Maybe you figure out on a Friday night and you go camping, you could get a campsite. Remember those? Well, that just doesn't exist anymore. But it was fun while it lasted. Sorry, all the younger folks, but it was good for a while in California. And of course, now we're in this crowded world. And those are just some fun pictures. There's Mission Peak up in the upper right there. And there's Shadow Cliffs on a 4th of July down on the lower left. Of course, now I should be picking on 4th of July, but and then camping, just forget camping. Camping, you have to look out 6, 8, maybe 12 months to get campsites in California. It's a different world. And the pandemic accelerated that. A lot of people discovered or rediscovered the outdoors and outdoor recreation, which is great because we spent the late 90s and the aughts telling everybody to come out and be healthy in parks. And boy, did they listen to us, and they all came. And they're all here now. And we have to deal with it. So what's happening is with all these folks and new users, and you see these classic pictures, we've got not only more people out here using our trails in different ways, and that has a potential for conflict because we've got the same numbers of people using the same limited finite number of trails. So more people on the same number of trails, which leads to more crowding and that potential for conflict. And of course, we've got new uses coming out. Down the lower left, we've got e-bikes has emerged as an issue that we're in conversation around. And then that one in the lower right, that's what I found just looking through the internet. I guess that's an electric mountain board is what they call that. So technology is giving us all kinds of new things we have to manage here in parks. And then there's the classic with dogs. So we've got, conflict occurring because we've got this limited number of trails, limited number of park spaces, and we've got more people than ever using different types of modalities of using trails. So we've got to manage that conflict. And with this crowding, what's happening is we're getting more impact to resources. And this is something I'm going to spend a little bit of time on because it's something that really concerns me and the staff. And I know the board has talked about this. This is the real where the rubber hits the road, to use a bad analogy. But we've got these user-built trails, these illegally user-built trails. And I want to talk a little bit about terminology because I think it's important. So in the trails world, we have multiple names for these types of things. You've heard me use the word bootleg, which is an older term that some of the staff go, what is that, bootleg? These are user-built trails that are illegally built. They're not planned. They're not designed properly. And then there's social trails. A lot of these social trails could be just where people cut a corner, or a lot of them are animal trails that people follow. But when we say bootlegs, we're talking, or volunteer trails, we're talking about these user-built trails that are not built officially, and they're not built to any design standards, which leads to some of the damage you see here: multiple braiding, water erosion. You see where they cross creeks improperly. Those are the types of things we're talking about. And so, just to give you an example, so here is a picture of Briones Regional Park, and this shows just under 50 miles of official trails that exist in Briones Park. And this, of course, is a combination of narrow trails and ranch roads and fire roads, as we like to call them, the ones that are 8 feet or greater or under 8 feet. So this is just under 50 miles. So now what I'm adding back in this picture, as you see, this is the known that we've done either through on the ground surveys of staff, a lot of it over a series of years. We've done actually on the ground with GPS units, mapping them out. And also Cara Betcher in our GIS, our GIS analyst worked with Jasky Singh in public affairs, and they did also a mapping exercise where they looked at satellite photos and also Strava data. Strava is an app that a lot of bicyclists use when they're out cycling. And what we've come up with is we currently have an additional 31 miles of unofficial trails. What we call volunteers or bootleg trails. So if you look at that number, that means that's an additional 62% of trails that are unofficial. If you combine those two numbers, that's 38% of our trails are user-built or non-official trails at this one park. This is one park out of 73 parks. And I can tell you from my conversations with staff that almost every park has some level of this. So this is just one park that we've done a deep dive on. And just for the record, the blue line you see is the proposed Briones pilot zone for the Briones pilot project, just to show one of the reasons we selected this area, the park, this northeast corner, is because it has a high concentration of these bootleg trails. And we want to address that issue, as President Coffey mentioned, as part of that project that we're working on, and hopefully we'll be implementing this spring. So that just gives you an example. And I have to say to all of you is we spent a lot of staff time working on permits to do regular trail maintenance. Matt Grall's team does an extraordinary amount so that we can go out and clean a culvert and not have a potential take of a red-legged frog or a California tiger salamander, things like that. Yet I will tell you that one of my biggest concerns as a land manager is this proliferation of user-built trails. I think this is a major impact to resources, our park resources, and it has to be addressed. And it's going to take an effort, a significant effort to address this. But this is one thing as a land manager. I teach classes at Merit, and I talk to my students, and this is one of the areas that I talk to them about this issue of impact moving forward in time. Because the biggest issue with these trails is that, trails always have an impact, right? And we go through a process to minimize that impact to it. We practice avoidance. If we can't practice avoidance, we do mitigation. And we really try to think carefully when we do a trail planning effort. And all those areas between trails, those are critical habitat. They're also areas of refuge for wildlife. And so these trails tend to cut through that, and they fracture those areas of refuge. And so I can tell you from the staff's perspective, this is one of our biggest concerns. And that's why I said at the beginning of today's session is I think there's some level of urgency that we have to address this, and why I wanted to bring this forward to all of you and get your feedback on this, because we as staff, your professional staff, think this is a major issue that we have to address. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. But we're not alone in this problem. Just a few headlines. I just did a quick search on the internet. These are just some headlines. Some of them are local. Marin County has the same issue. Walnut Creek is addressing an issue at Lime Ridge. They're having all of the same, if this is an article that talked about bootleg or illegal user built trails, and they're seeking to build a flow trail there to hopefully curtail this illegal trail use that's occurring to meet that user need of cyclists. So they're in the same boat as we are. And I think you know that the city of Pleasanton at Augustine Burnell is also looking to build a flow trail in their park. So this is not an isolated issue with us. It's a national issue. I've seen lots of articles nationally about this issue, about these illegally usable trails. So anyway, I'll move on. And on top of all this, the climate's changing. So while we're still trying to manage these social issues of users, we also have the climate is changing. You know, we're going to have extremes of persistent drought, followed by extreme rain events that we have to manage. And of course, when you have drought, you get fire. And that's a huge issue. And of course, that's been a big talk in this district and a big effort that's going on. And then along our shoreline parks, we're also trying to manage shoreline sea level rise on our shoreline trails, the Bay Trail. So this is on top of all of the social issues around human use of trails. Okay, and I'm going to pass this off to Lisa Gorgian, our acting AGM of ASD, and she's going to cover the public input portion of this.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Gorgian, the Acting Assistant General Manager over Acquisition Stewardship. Just to continue with this presentation with the public component. So we know public engagement is really critical to the Park District. And the board of directors know this, and to that end, ask staff to engage specifically to initiate a stakeholder working group with a specific focus on trails. So staff invited over 30 different groups, stakeholder groups, to participate in a trails user working group. President Coffey called it the TUG. I've heard it the TWUG as well. It has lots of names. They met 9 times from August 2020 to February 2022. And as I'm going over this, I just want to acknowledge the staff, Devin Reef and Brian Holt, Sean. Lots of staff were really engaged in working with this group of stakeholders. 9 meetings over a year and a half is a long time. And so there was a lot of discussions. And so I'm just going to be summarizing what some of the information was. These, I'm happy to say all of these meetings were recorded. They're posted on YouTube. You can hit like and subscribe if you want to watch them. There's a lot of good information. So just with the members representing 30 different organizations, there really was a variety of input. There is a summary document that's available on our website. The link is in the packet, so you can take a look at that. If you haven't, I'm sure you have, but the following slides go over that high level information that was in the report. And again, I just want to highlight with 30 groups, the information that's in the report and what I'm sharing, it's not representing everyone who's in those groups' exact perspective, but it's really meant to be an overview of what the overarching perspectives and goals were. So, and what you'll see and what Jim has described, we didn't hear everything's fine, don't do anything. There was a lot of key goals and actions and solutions that were proposed. Generally, the key issues really focused around actions by visitors and sort of how we're managing, how the Park District is managing these trails. So these are really observations from the trail user working group. These were their key issues that they've identified and their thoughts on both the issues, and then I'll get to the solutions. So really focusing, again, these are words that really Jim previously showed you the pictures of what they were. And coming to their solutions that were proposed, they really identified pretty comprehensive from beginning with planning to how data that's needed to inform education, management, and then enforcement, and again, maintenance and management once trails are built. So it's really, you know, when you think about park planning and development, they've identified from the beginning to the end sort of opportunities for improvement. After the work with the Trails User Working Group completed, was finished, the staff transitioned to meeting with the Park Advisory Committee. So updates on the work of the TUG or the TWUG, and the work that had been done was presented first just as an update to the Park Advisory Committee earlier this year in January. And then Brian presented a summary of the report in March. In October, just a couple of months ago, the staff engaged with the Park Advisory Committee in a workshop style discussion that was really exciting, very fun. So really you were there, to really try to identify the issues that are affecting our trail network. So the key issues, you'll begin to see a theme here, are really representative of, again, the pictures that Jim showed at the beginning, the issues that the TWUG or the TUG identified, and no surprises, the solutions really are in alignment with the solutions that have been previously identified by, that were identified by the Trail User Working Group. And I think some of the solutions that staff has been already discussing with the board. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim for the most exciting part.
All right, thank you very much, Lisa. So where do we go from here? So what we wanted to do with the board today is we took the staff perspectives, the public perspective, and we put them in 4 what we call guiding principles, general themes. And we put some of the thoughts and ideas about how to address those themes underneath that. And what my plan was, and I'm open to your thoughts, is I'd go through each one of those and we'd have an interaction on that principle and get your thoughts, your ideas around that principle. We're obviously keeping notes on that as we move forward. And then I'll work to the next one and we'll work through all 4 of them if that works for all of you. Okay, so we'll work through that. And so the first principle and this is gathering this all together and trying to put some framework around all of this input we've had to date. So the first one we're working on is trail-related decisions and actions should be based on data. This park district, we do collect some data, and I know in the legislative group does some survey work around trails, and we have trail counters in several of our parks, but we really, and I know Jim Landreth has mentioned this on many occasions, that we need to become a much more data-driven organization. So this is one of the areas, especially around trail usage, we need to know what's happening on trails. So just some thoughts we had here: district-wide trail user surveys, trail counters, direct counts, dedicated staff assigned to this work, because it does take a lot of time to do this work. Inventory evaluation of our trail network is where you begin. What do you have? What does it look like? What condition is it in? And then inventory of these user-built trails, so that not only do we know what's going on, but then monitor what's happening to the future. And is it expanding? Is it contracting? especially as we start to engage with the user community, and are we getting a handle on this? So anyway, I'll stop there, and we're here, and I've got the whole plethora of trail folks here and beyond, and hopefully we can answer some questions, and we're really looking forward to your input.
All right, members of the board, input on principle 1.
So I just say that data is good. That's a good first one. And I think we all know that keeping track of, well, one of our public speakers talked about, knowing how many bootleg trails we have. And since they increase daily, that's kind of a difficult number to get to, but it is the kind of thing that you can do with your park staff. I mean, you can say, this is a goal, this month, we want you to give us some indication of what are the bootleg trails and estimate of the size, because I think that is an important piece of data for us to have. And the other one that I really love is counting how many people are using what trails and what devices they're using on the trails. For me, I've been enthusiastic about us not penalizing seniors on e-bikes, but the fact of the matter is that those e-bikes are taking people deep into parks, if I'm not mistaken, much deeper than some of the pedal, driven bikers have been able to do. So we have more people going out further. And I'd like to know if that's just a guess or if that is truly what's happening. And then I think we need to get data on some of these other weird other devices that are coming up, the various types of, they look like skateboards with a variety of ways to move around. And then we need to talk about what non-motorized means with regard to that. But I totally agree that to begin with, the data is important, but I don't want us to spend all our time on that.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about getting more and better data on e-bikes, and I keep coming back to, but we see it's happening. And we could take a survey today that estimates maybe 30% of the bikes on the regional trails or more, or that are just using in-park trails are e-bikes. But within a year, it's going to be more. We just know that it's all visible. So I'm always just scratching my head and thinking, we could spend several years collecting data, and by the time we're done, e-bikes are going to be in the majority of use. It's there. And so that's my hesitation about the efficacy of data collection is, one, it's always changing. And two, we get a pretty good idea just from, as I mentioned earlier, just from using the parks and being there as individuals and out there. And I hesitate about analysis paralysis. In other words, if we really want to get our hands around e-bikes, for instance, and whether they have some unique regulatory needs that are distinct from ordinary bikes, and so far I can't think of them, but if we want to do that, then we got to get a handle on it now before they quote unquote take over, which they're rapidly doing as more and more people that use regular bicycles are now using e-bikes. And I intend to, and it's just, it's happening. So that's my hesitation about the data collection and potential for analysis paralysis. Elizabeth.
I think you can
Sure.
I don't know why I keep forgetting to use the mic today. So anyway, I was just saying that I think it's very important to have good data to make good decisions. And I also agree that, you don't want to have analysis paralysis, or, of course not. But I think particularly when we're looking for correlations, like a couple of the public speakers and staff and others talked about, if we build new trails for our bicycle users, will the bootleg trails really go down? So that's a place where I think we absolutely need the data to know whether that correlation is accurate. And I think that, we should, if we get trail counters, particularly in certain places, certain strategic places to start, then I would certainly advocate for having one right at that beginning of that Point Malate trail when it gets open, to see like how much it increases over time and the usage. I think those kinds of things are also important. On the e-bikes, yeah, we could try to measure all the e-bikes, but I think the kind of data that we need for e-bikes is really, how do they differ? How are they evolving? How could you address, how could you even enforce a policy if we decided to have a special policy on e-bikes? Because some of them do look a lot like regular bicycles, and I'm sure that'll continue as the e-bikes evolve. So, I think we have to choose the data that is going to be most helpful and focus there.
So many different things I could mention. I'll try to stay on one. In myself visiting national parks and running into places where no bikes are used in this area, or you can use a bike, but only this kind of bike, and they're really enforced. They allow these trails to continue to be taken care of and not torn up because of too much use or whatever. I've seen that. And I think you probably studied to see what happens in other park districts. But I think that that's an important thing to see what kind of opportunities there are out there for usage of parks, for different types of use. We could just absolutely destroy some of our parks. We could absolutely destroy Redwood Park if everybody was driving through on motorbikes of some sort. And I think we really should be concerned about protecting certain parts of our land. We may have some parts of our land where it makes sense to have certain types of use, and we do that already, but that doesn't mean we would have that kind of usage in a place that's more sensitive, or maybe has more sensitive population, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we really, really have to seriously take a look at our parks and see what the usage is, and how we will use that land. It's really important. We do have people who have just certain ways they want to use their bicycle or their type of bicycle, and they want to use any park any way they want to use it. And we have to, it's so hard that we have to figure out how we protect some parks, and maybe have some areas where more usage can be done. But we could really destroy some of our parks if we just let them, be used in any way. And part of it is in just listening to people who come to our meetings, or people we bump into in the parks. They have a certain way they like to use their day at the park, and they have a certain type of facility that they have. And that's what they're thinking about. I'd like to use this kind of bicycle, and I don't have any thoughts on saving it, or saving that park in another way. So what do? Do we just close down certain parks and say these parks are only used for this type of use, hikeage, use with your dogs or your horses, but no, you can't use any machines here? We'd really have to look at all the different things that could happen out there and condition them in certain areas. We don't seem to do that in some areas. And in some areas, we have a hard time like that map you just showed us a little while ago, stopping people from using the parks in a certain way, because that's all they got. So I don't know, it's not an easy issue, but I do think there are, if we look at some other park districts, maybe some national parks, there might be some opportunities where land has been protected by its usage, but also other parts of the parks where people can use them in other ways as well. So I don't know, this is not going to be an easy thing, but I think it is really important that we protect our parks. It isn't going to be easy.
I think the best example of what you're talking about, Ellen, of what not to do is Joaquin Miller. I won't hike Joaquin Miller anymore. I've been out there a couple of times over the last year. The park is totally beat up in terms of the quality of the trail, the physical dirt and rock that has become of their trails. The bicyclists are creating new shortcut trails, but as they go downhill, wanting to go down vertical rather than on existing trails. So they continue to chew up that park, and the constant negotiating when you get to a narrow spot and you have to stop, and I have to like throw up my hands and say, hey, bicycle, are you going to stop? And how do we get around each other? That's just totally disruptive of the pedestrian hiking experience. So we have a living example next to Redwood, which is a supremely superior parkland.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I've thought about too, where people are not using certain parks that have been all beaten up, have been all chewed up. So they're going somewhere nearby next door to start using the park in a way they want to use it and heavy duty use it. That'll eventually impact those trails. So, we just kind of have to think what, who's the space available for, and do we divide it and whatever. But, and I just having grown up in the East Oakland area and seeing how things have changed in those parks you talked about, some people don't even use those parks anymore. So they're coming over to use ours because the other parks are too beat up.
Yeah, that's been Dee's observation when we talk about Redwood.
Yeah. So what do you do?
President Coffey, can I make a suggestion? Since we seem to be more free flowing in our conversation, how about if I run through the 4 principles and then we open it up for
Instead
more?
of taking them one at a time,
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, I'm gonna do that.
We will otherwise
And
just-
like I said, board members, this is really just giving a framework for your comments and your discussion that we're here to listen. We just thought it might be helpful to have them sort of grouped together and based on the information we've gotten today. So I'm going to run through these really quick and not read every one of these ideas. So the next one is this is a big one. It encompasses almost everything we've been talking about, but one of our long-term goals is to hopefully create a comprehensive and sustainable trail network. So comprehensive goes to some of the comments that Director Corbett is talking about. Do we look at a regional perspective on providing trail access? Does it just have to be our trails, or could it be our partner agencies? We look at the bike issue. Does it have to be just us meeting that need? Could it be other agencies? So that's what we mean by a comprehensive look. Regionally, are those uses being accommodated, not just with us, but others? And then sustainable, it goes back to conversations we've had for years, but really looking at how we design, we develop, and how we maintain our trails and creating a trail system that's sustainable in the long run in terms of its impact to the environment, the trail user experience, safety, all of those things, but move towards that. And obviously it's easy to do that with newly built trails, but we also need to look at some of our existing trails. And then the other aspect of this is how do we manage existing trails and this crowding on the existing trail network. And that's what the Briones pilot project is about, is looking at how do we manage trails, existing trails, the use on trails. I'm going to keep moving on here. Here was a big theme that came out of the public and current work that we do as a district, but ensure that district trails are accessible and welcoming to all community members, and make sure that everybody has a chance to enjoy trails, wherever they come from, whatever their background is, whatever their cultural background is. Everybody should have an opportunity to enjoy our trails. And if there's transportation issues, barriers, try to overcome those barriers, but also some of that is about our workforce. Do we have a diverse workforce that makes people feel welcome? That was another thing that came out of our public input process. And I'll move on. Number 4, resource protection has got to be a priority. This is obviously in the trail development phase and planning phase. We practice avoidance. We start with the resources as a number 1 layer when we're looking at how to lay out a trail system. Appropriate use based on data, scientific data. Make sure we get that data so that we know what the resources are and potentially what the use is. Addressing these user-built trails is going to require, one of the messages, and I hope the folks that are listening in the audience, is we cannot do this alone. Just look at Briones Park. They have 7 regular staff there for 4,000 acres. We need the public's cooperation. If we're going to curtail user-built trails, we need to get the users' cooperation. We cannot do this alone. And it's going to be a part of cooperation, and we have to have some more targeted enforcement. Enforcement has to be a big part of this. My current vision would be that we go through trail planning efforts, looking at this. The term has been passed around, and we still haven't defined what that means, but trails master planning. But if we go through a trails master planning effort and we put all that staff time and that public money into an effort like that, after that, then there has to be a significant enforcement effort. Say we've tried to meet your needs, and now we need to enforce. But we need public cooperation if we're going to make this work. Repeat good trail design, routine maintenance, minimizes environmental impacts, and then we need volunteers to assist the staff. So those are the 4 groupings that we brought up based on the input we've had to date. And so at that point, I'm just going to open it up and we can range wherever you want to range.
No doubt we'll range far and wide. Can I put the chief on the spot for a moment just to finish this up, especially as you put your finger on the need for targeted enforcement as we experiment? And if our associates in the bike council or various biking organizations can't alone create a new culture around the need to shut down some of these unlawful trails and recapture that habitat, then we're going to have to put greater effort into enforcing that. And so I wanted to ask the chief, what our experience has been, because my impression has been that we will, largely park ranger staff will attempt to close these trails and create obstacles, fencing or whatever. And at Briones, people go out there in the middle of the night and cut things down. And the chief is presented with, showing up the next day and things have been taken apart. So what do we need to do? Do we have cameras? Do you actually start arresting people who go out there and try to reopen trails? How is that going to happen?
Well, and I'll pass it off to the chief here in 1 second. But one thing, here's the standing theory that goes, in these interactions we've had with the bicycle community, is that we are not meeting their needs for their trail experience that they're looking for. And so the theory goes is that if we were to open more trails and potentially have more bike optimized trails, is the terminology we use, that would curtail the building of user built trails. So that's the working theory that we have going. So that's a long-term process, because we'd have to go through some, we had the conversation Sean presented that were the very initial stages of thinking about a flow trail at Wildcat, but we go through a process like that. But in my mind, and listen, I worked in the law enforcement side of this business also, is that once we go through that process and we've done a fair look at, providing as much access as we can in our parks, but looking at that regionally, is after that, then we will have to demand compliance, because this is about protecting these parks that all of us come because of the natural habitat that exists. So that's my side of it, and I'll pass it off to the chief.
Great, thanks, Jim. Super. Thanks. Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, Board of Directors, General Manager, and colleagues. Anthony Chaburo, your Chief of Police. I think Mr. O'Connor summed it up eloquently. I think there are two sides to this. There definitely is a precision side, and we want to be as effective and as exacting as we can in our enforcement. But the other side is really park planning and patron management. And I think there are some steps that need to be taken here as I listen to what's happening here, and I look to my colleagues on my right and on my left. I really think we do need a place for people to go. We do need to acknowledge that this is a movement, as Mr. O'Connor said, and you said it as well, Director, that we don't know how many what the level of electric bikes are. We do know they are growing and perhaps exponentially in terms of a user group. And for us, in our experience, it comes down to precision, trying to manage, as I always say, as I extend my arms out and say this much terrain with this amount of resources, which is what we have. And it is appropriate as long as we're as efficient as we can be. So our stance, our mindset from public safety is we want to work together in collaboration, not only with the community, but our colleagues here. And we really want to zero in on these areas that are experiencing the highest level of frequency and intensity in terms of whether it's safety, whether it's someone who is in a specific area where they shouldn't be, or whether it's something else. So I do think it's a process to conclude my remarks that absolutely, we need a place for this new user group and or consistent user group and growing group to go. And then from that, we merge that together with enforcement. So we provide these places to go, and then we really do what we've been doing for quite a bit of time now. We do take statistics, we take extremely valuable information from park operations and from our patrons, and then also from police officers, and then we get as specific as we can on these areas. To answer your question, they are citations that we are issuing. We're trying to make that process easier. So that's part of an administrative citation process that is coming. But that's how I view it in this effort in terms of where does law enforcement come into this scenario?
You know, I've been told by some of your officers that patrol brownies, for instance, that when they get in the park and go out to ticket people using illegal trails, that the mountain bikers have social media platforms that they will let all of their colleagues that are biking in the park know where the officer is. And then they'll go and drift off somewhere else. So it makes, modern technology makes your ability to enforce, I think, even harder. But how do you address critics who say, if people go out in the middle of the night and try to remove the restoration efforts that we've made to bootleg trails, why aren't we just arresting people and stopping that from happening?
Well, I think first for the critics is we're trying to administer, to police, to collaboratively control the largest regional park system in the country. And we certainly have to evaluate and prioritize what we're doing. Where do we spend our precious enforcement resources? And then I do think the other part of that, which is for the critics, which is unmeasured, is the planning process of this, the patron management and the park planning part, which as has been described via this process, I would lean again on my colleagues in this collaborative effort and say, we haven't done the work there. We are very good at enforcing. We're very good at gathering information and focusing on specific areas, but in the spirit of all this, and I think perhaps if I'll go as far as to say what comes through us from the general manager, from you, the legislative intent really is to manage these patrons in the best way possible without enforcement and try to address that aberrant behavior. That's where we are in terms of law enforcement.
Okay, so insofar as this is, prompting discussion, my response would be if we have a pilot project like that going on at Briones, there might have to be a higher prioritization in enforcing the restoration of some of these unlawful trails that chew up habitat in consideration of creating more dedicated bike trails. So that might, I think that would bring with it a need for prioritizing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Board members, we have the four principles Thank you, Chief. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. We have the four principals. I'll look around the Zoom room and I see Ann. So have at it.
Okay, one, I think it is an excellent idea to plan a trail for the honest people, some of them young people who want to do the mountain biking in an area where we have found out it's the safest for the environment too, and we're working on that. As for electric bikes, I know several people who are more mature and have been using our parks forever, and they have found electric bikes enable them to still get exercise, but when they come to a little hill that they can't do, they use the electric bike. So there's a place for electric bikes. I've also seen here in Livermore flat trails where young people are going without getting any exercise, going too fast on trails. So how we can enforce the electric bike issue is something we have to think carefully about. It enables some people to continue doing what they've always done in a safe manner. And so we need to protect their right to do that. Where people are deciding we're going to race up the hills, then we'll have to see what we can do about that. We have more people in this area constantly. The population is growing. And we have to accept that many of those people, because we tell the world how wonderful we are constantly, that they're going to come out and want to try it. I think we need to give them, if we're going to do bike trails as such, we need to think about not just one, but put them in various areas of the park system. And I think the more we can find excellent examples in other adjacent counties, places, we ought to look to them and see what they've learned. We only have so many police officers and they have a lot of things to do. So again, you're going to have to prioritize. I'd like to think that we can help people understand why it's important to have places where horses can go, places where people who want a quiet trail can go, and nobody will try racing up in a bicycle behind them. It's just the responsibility you, and I can say you in the future because I'm not around much longer on the board, have is to try to serve a wide group of people who we want to use our park and to do it correctly. And I don't think it's going to be an easy task at all, but I expect you will do your best to do it. But remember, give people, and I'm going to bring up somebody we haven't mentioned enough, and that's park supervisors. Park supervisors, I've talked to them often enough, and they are so frustrated when they have gone out there and have repaired and rebuilt and reconstructed and done everything, and a group comes in shortly thereafter and trashes what they had spent time, money, and effort on. That's got to be discouraging. So if they have any ideas, talk to our park supervisors. The people are out there in the field, and see if they've got some ideas on how we can make it a better place for themselves and for our users. Don't try to outlaw something that you're not going to be able to do. Try to give people a chance to do it correctly. And if they break the rules and you catch them at it, give them a ticket and make them pay. And that's my best advice.
It's good advice. And I know Jim and Steve are constantly interacting with our park supervisors. I get that feedback from them all the time. Other members, Dee?
Yeah, thank you. This is a great discussion. Data collection, absolutely. The more we know, the better we can make better decisions. And we need to know who's using our parks and how. I think that's incredibly important. And I think we have a a small or not small, I think it's a large dedicated portion of our volunteers that could be utilized in our volunteer patrols or mounted patrols, or but they could be doing some of those surveys for us, you know, as well as our ambassadors. They could be conducting surveys. So there's a lot of things to do as far as that, but I absolutely think we need to have data, and you need more than one way to do it. So and then creating a sustainable network, definitely, I think we have a lot of potential here with connecting with our local cities, our East Bay Mud, PG&E, and all these other agencies. So we can actually maybe create a regional trail network. That would be wonderful. And then it would expand the experience for not just for the park district, but for everybody on all lands. And then and ensuring accessibility, that's always close to my heart. And I think that's something this agency's always been conscious of. And transportation is a big one, but also making people aware, like we learned from the East Oakland Collective, just making people aware that, yeah, there's parks right next door, you know? And so, and then resource protection, that's one of the things, like, to me, it's like, in a way, I feel like these bootleg trails, people that keep doing it, it's almost like we're being held ransom, we're being blackmailed in a way. You know, we won't stop this unless you build us our trails. And so, and then the damage that they do is incredibly bad for the environment and for the endangered species that we're here to protect. And I think the targeted approach is a good one, but we need to hire more. We'll have to expand the SEU unit, and we're definitely going to have more officers, as we've seen in all of our departments. We need more park rangers. We need more of everything, and in order for us to adequately protect this land. And I know when we were creating the resource protection area along Stream Trail, I was always advocating to get the equestrian unit out there all the time, because they were out there the longest. You know, once they drop that trailer, they're there for at least 3 hours. And so anything we can do to target areas where we know there's a problem, and use our resources that way. You know, you can't be everywhere at once. And then also, just as another, well, no, I won't tell that story. But yeah, I think back to electric bikes, one thing we can do, I mean, we've had a pilot project for electric bikes on our regional paved trails. That should come before the board for determination of are we going to do it or not? Because it's been a year and a half or a year, so that should come up for discussion and a vote. But as been pointed out by some of our public comment letters, the Trail User Working Group did not talk about electric bikes at all. And so we need to have that public discussion as well as board discussion too. And that goes into collecting data and everything else. So, but I really thank you for this concept and all the work that's gone into it. This is something that's been going on forever. You know, so it's like dogs, trails, they're all conflicts, that the same as things keep coming up over and over again. But yeah, resource protection, trail use, and just getting along. So yeah, major campaigns as far as trail etiquette, trail use. And I think what we did with Monaco, and we had the multimedia event on trail or park etiquette. I thought that was a great start. So yeah, this is not an easy thing. It's going to be multi-phase approach. And so I think all the work that's gone into it, and the board needs, we need tools to make decisions. And I think the Briones and the Wildcat will be great pilot projects if they get approved, and to see where we're at. So thank you.
We'll go to Dennis, but I did want to mention, I think you told me, and I didn't attend the meeting, but you took up e-bikes with the PAC last Monday?
We did.
Good.
And we're going to pull together a summary of comments and we'll share that with the board.
Yeah, and I'm going to make sure I get on YouTube and watch that. Dennis?
Thank you. So Jim, I wish you had gone point by point. I'm scattered all over the world now, but I come away from this suggesting that I think we just need to make a decision. We need to do something. I used to love the idea of saying, oh, we balance recreation versus resource protection, but at some point, the middle of the road is not going to work. I think we need to suggest this is what we're going to allow in our park. And I'm not suggesting what it is because I don't know, because we need data. But, I know we don't allow lots of things in the park district. There's many things that we say aren't appropriate for the park district. Just because people want to do it doesn't mean we let them do it. There were people that used to, in my career, I keep thinking about this history. There were lots of people that would like to go to Shadow Cliffs and Sunol and Redwood, by the way, and drink a lot of alcohol on the weekends. And that was their idea of recreation. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. And each one of those cases, we were still understaffed in park rangers. We were still understaffed in police officers, but we made the decision. Everybody's going to Shadow Cliffs today. We're sending all of our officers to Shadow Cliffs, and we're going to stop this. And it took, I don't know how long it took, but we were able to do it. And I think enforcement's an incredible part of this. I mean, we can sit here and theorize and do all kinds of things. And I personally think that we're going to have to respond to bicyclists and mountain bikers and have areas and make it try. I personally do not agree with the theory that just because we build them a couple miles of trail in Wildcat Canyon, that's going to change anything. It's all anecdotal. I know some mountain bikers. I know a lot of bushwhacking hikers who say, this is my experience to go off trail where there are no people. I hate people and I want to go fast on my bike. And it's all anecdotal and I'm stereotyping because we don't have the data. On that, I agree with Rosario. We need more data. I think we should use our volunteers. I also think we ought to reinstate the program of light duty in the park district. Jokingly, I used to always think when I had staff that would get hurt and they would get light duty where they couldn't work as a park in the parks or as a park ranger or something, they go, okay, we're going to put you on light duty and put you in the main office. Geez, they got healthy in a couple seconds. They were not made for that lifestyle and up there at Peralta Oaks. So the idea of having them go out and do studies, they could work this. Let's get some real data. Just once again, just free flowing stuff. If we're going to call these user built trails, I think we lose the battle. I think on the slide that Jim showed, every one of these other agencies that he said were dealing with this, they were called illegal trails. If we're going to call them user-built trails, that's okay, cool. You guys built them, thanks. I think we need to call them what they are, and we need to try to eliminate them if they're ruining our resource protection goals. What else? Oh, gosh. Once again, I don't have the data. It's only anecdotal, but I think this is a problem that is within 1 mile of every trailhead, in my opinion. We keep talking about, I've had many people, including, well, it doesn't matter, but that suggest we need to build separate trails for bikes. Everybody's too crowded. We keep talking about overcrowding. It's only anecdotal evidence. It's just my life in my little world, but I hike in Lake Chabot every day. And as soon as I get a mile up away from any staging area, I don't see anybody. I don't have any problems. I do see some people, but wide open. When I see a cyclist coming, when I'm a mile out on the trail, I usually see them. I say hello, we all greet each other. People get nicer the farther you get out on trails. I think Rosario can agree with that. But I was at McGuire Peaks on Monday of this week. It's a 6-mile hike. I was there for over 4 hours. I saw 4 people, one group of 4 people. I don't think there's anybody on the trails. When I did the 32 mile of the Skyline National Trail last summer, we hardly saw anybody. The only time you see people is a mile off of any staging area. And then once you get out there in the real parks, probably 1,200 of our 1,300 miles of trails, there's nobody there. It's all to yourself, and everybody's pretty friendly and nice. So I would love to see some data on that. I mean, if we're going to put out, cameras or counters, let's put them way out in the park where people can get away and do stuff. I don't know that solves any problems. But I also think we need to enforce. You have to enforce, and citing people. I think we should build a trail. I probably will be, unless some of these environmental questions like Amelia brought up and the Sierra Club has brought up, if they're proven to be okay that we can build a trail in Wildcat, I would be for it. But boy, I want some data, because I don't think that's going to stop anybody from suggesting I want to have my own personal trail in the parks, and nobody's going to do anything to me if I do. So why not build all I want, anytime I want? So anyway, that's my opinion.
Thank you. This reminds me that you did present, Jim, some very specific data in association with the presentation on the pilot project at Briones, that you were able to show us specific trails and how utilization had increased during the pandemic. Some of those trails 300%, and you had very precise figures. And this was all collected off that app that the bicyclists use.
Strava.
Strava. And so that was a source of very specific trail use data. And we were able to look at it and say, yeah, there's a volume issue in Briones. I'm able to get lost very quickly in the wilderness of Black Diamond as well, where you have a lot of steepness and you just don't have that kind of volume. But in Briones we do, in Tilden we do. I mean, they're just Mission Peak, obviously. So there are parks, and you almost got to go park by park, where this is a more acute issue, especially now, than in other parks where you can still get lost. So Dennis has a good point there. Other board members, Director Lane.
Yes, I have just a couple of comments, and one is I do feel that we can use volunteers way more effectively than we do now. And of course, it will need resources, but having an individual there with an official vest or whatever makes people think, and volunteers can collect data, educate people, all of the things that we already have in place. And so perhaps we need to think about tackling an increase in the volunteer safety patrol, seeing if ambassadors want to do some different things. Docents out of visitor centers can be a presence, which will make people value the resources, et cetera. So I think that's something that we really ought to think about doing. And then I want to say a word on behalf of a user that has not been mentioned. And we talked about 30 groups in the working group. There are hiking clubs everywhere. So I didn't see a representative of a hiking club there. And probably some of them do use hiking clubs. And I know that there were people who were hikers, but I'm always concerned that we fold them in, because people who have they're one of our primary users.
Yeah, thank you for that, Director Lane. Brian Holt, Chief Planning, Trails and GIS. When we formed the Trail User Working Group, I often say we kind of took the Noah's Ark approach of sort of trying to identify, 2 cyclists, 2 environmentalists, and the groups did start to get pretty big. But there was a lot of it. We hear from a lot of people saying, yeah, we need to bring in the hiking groups. So we did have representatives from Orinda Hiking Club, and I'm trying to think, we had another hiking club that was represented there, and then of course we had Sierra Club and Native Plant and some of of those other groups that
Mhm.
often lead guided hikes represented on there as well. So we did specifically have the hiking clubs participate throughout that process.
Okay, well, that's really good to know.
Yeah, there was a lot of interest in having them participate. So we welcome them on. We welcome them on the boat, the ark with everybody else.
Yeah.
So.
And my final thing really has to do with diversity. And so we're talking your number 3 is in ensure accessibility and welcoming. And our populations are growing and they're aging. And I just think we need to really think about what seniors and families need in trail use. And I'm really pleased. It looks like we're doing that with Roddy Ranch. And in any of our trail planning, we need to keep that in mind. I know at one point at Pleasant Ridge, we tried bringing people up on shuttles and then having them hike down. And I had a much older friend who kept calling me and saying, so what do you have for me? What do you have for me? I can't do this anymore. And we just need to really pay attention. Serving seniors is not managing to get 10 groups from a senior facility into our park. It's way bigger than that. And then that folds in really well with volunteers, because there are a lot of seniors who have incredible things that they could bring to us. And then finally, just to say, I like your principles. I think it's really good to have a guiding attitude toward this, and the 4 of them I think are really very good. So thank you for putting that together, everybody.
Sure. Yeah, I also want to say that I really like the principles. I think you all did a fantastic job. And of course, I already spoke to the data point that to make good decisions, you need good data. Certainly to have comprehensive and sustainable trail network that's core to our mission, and the diversity and equity, I think is also incredibly important. And that's a real passion of mine. So I'm glad to see that on here. And then finally, we've spoken a lot about the resource protection, and that of course is a priority as well. So I'm just going to keep it short and say, well done.
Thank you.
Dee?
One thing I wanted to mention, making our trail sustainable, is we really should look at some of these really steep fire roads. And in talking with Matt Grell, he said it is possible to get permits for those, but it's a lot of work. But we really should take a look at all those parks with those steep trails. I mean, Tyler Ranch, there's a couple of this like, oh my God, really?
Del Amigo Trail.
Yeah.
Las Trampas.
It's just like, we should look into getting those trails rerouted so that they're usable by the majority of the people, and rehab and restore the closed trails. So,
Director Rosario, that's a really great comment. I have experience with actually that. In Santa Clara County, they've gone through 4 what they call Trails Master Planning process, which is a park by park approach. It's a full comprehensive engagement with the trail user community. What that actually ended up doing in several parks is eliminating some trails that were erosive. They were old ranch roads, and then creating new trails. The challenge you have is trying to get the environmental community and our regulatory partners to understand that the short-term damage that would come from that realignment is offset by the long-term sustainability of a trail system you create by doing that. And we actually did that in Santa Clara County. We actually did some real amazing realignments, including using earth movers to eliminate old ranch road trails and then building new trails. And they're challenging. They look ugly for about 3 or 5 years until they revegetate. There was a trail in a park called Harvey Bear that you could see from 101 from San Martin Avenue, and they built a new trail, and you could see it from the freeway. But after about 5 years, you couldn't see it anymore. But can we get people to understand that parks are forever? And if it takes 5 or so years for a trail to be rehabbed and revegetated, but you have a long-term sustainable trail system that's not only less maintenance, less erosive, a better user experience, would it be worth doing that and having that short-term damage for the long-term goal? And that's a tough thing to get people to understand and to agree to, not only in the community with our public, but also with the regulators. But how we can create that long-term vision for parks and actually doing that kind of work and getting people to accept that short-term impact for the long-term goal, that would be the ultimate goal. If we could get people to understand that and do that type of work, that type of trails planning and evaluation, that would be the ultimate goal, because long-term, that's going to give everybody the best thing, best for the environment, best for users, best for staff.
Okay, anything further, Ellen? Before we go to public comment?
Yeah, well, I already spoke earlier, and so I just appreciate all the comments people have made. I just think that there's things we can do to make things better, and people have to think about allowing the parks to be in good shape. I guess what I'm most worried about would be people taking great looking parts of the park and overusing them and destroying them. That would be a tough thing. And if there's some opportunity to take parts of the park that have been hit harder or used more, then what can we do to protect them? It's a lot of work, but I definitely think we should have some plans on what to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll turn to public comments. So as William has done, if you're out in the Zoom world, please raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you. And Jim, what I'm going to do is after public comment or any closing board comments, I would like to ask you to close out the meeting by suggesting where we go from here and perhaps addressing that mystery question of whether you're promoting a master trail planning process out of this and whether you're being overt about it or being a little cagey. So we got some questioning on that. So that will be our closing, where we're going to go from here. We had submitted public comments from the Sierra Club and Norman, who was out of town today. We got a comprehensive letter from the coalition of 7 organizations arising out of the Trail Users Working Group with a cover note from Josh. And that group includes the Sierra Club, Native Plants, San Ramon Horsemen's Association, California State Horsemen's Association, and the Bicycle Trails Council. We had submission from Isaac Gonzalez, Scott Bartlebow. Thank you, Scott. Mike Vanderman, Sarah Brown, and Manuel Acosta, who's one of the mountain biking coaches. So we'll acknowledge receiving those, and then we'll go to public comment. And Madam Secretary, do you have something to add?
Yes, thank you, President Coffey. I just want to acknowledge the list that you just provided. We have 2 of those public commenters on the line that would like to speak, and I would just prefer that they have priority since they did meet the deadline and submit their written comments yesterday.
Okay, then if you can handle it for me as keeping track. I see Sarah, and who else from that? Well, you take us along that route.
Yeah,
Thank you.
let's go with Sarah. Sarah, can you please unmute and you can start your video now.
My name is Sarah. I'm 10 years old and I go to Park Day School in Elkhorn. I'm new to the Wildcat Composite mountain bike team. I've been mountain biking for like 2.5 years, and we go to Tilden like a few times a month. When I was little, my dad had to tow me up the hills in Tilden, but now I can get up them on my own. And I really like Tilden because I can improve my skills on the rocky sections a little bit more every time I come, but sometimes it gets really crowded with hikers and dog walkers. And so it would be really nice to have a trail just for bikes, especially because there aren't any flow trails around here, and it would also be fun to ride, and it might encourage more kids to mountain bike. So thanks for letting me speak and for making Tilden such a nice place to ride.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Isaiah Gonzalez and Isaac Gonzalez.
Hi, everyone. My son had camera stage fright at the last minute, so unfortunately he's not going to speak. But I'll go quick with it on what he was going to say. His name's Isaiah. I'm Isaac. I'm a coach on the Wildcat Composite Middle School mountain bike team. My son's 12 years old. There's like 174 kids and coaches that ride 1 to 2 to 3 times a week out in the regional parks, mostly Tilden. And what draws us to kind of riding the trails is that we're able to get exercise, have fun, kind of overcome challenges, do some of those really tough hills like Seaview and things like that. But sometimes, our options are pretty limited on the trails that we ride. There hasn't been like a new trail built in quite a long time that was bike legal. And we naturally prefer narrower trails such as the ones that like Crockett and things like that. So a proposed flow trail at Wildcat Canyon would be a heck of a lot better than riding down Javi Canyon that can't take, acclimate weather, and also the Mezu Trail that's really steep and it's more of a fire road for people to kind of go up. We just want to thank the East Bay Regional Park District for staying open during the COVID, and also to preserve a green space for us and keep, mountain biking in mind as well as our kids, because the more, that I ride with these kids, I'm like, these are our future, and these are the people who are going to kind of effectively use the trail and get stronger and explore our outdoors and fresh air instead of sitting around playing video games. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to remind all the commenters that you have 3 minutes. And next is William Uregi.
Thanks again, William Uregi with Mission Peak Conservancy. If I have my numbers correct, there are more miles of illegal trails built in Briones since 2016 than East Bay built since 2015. So in other words, you had more miles of illegal trails and one park built than East Bay Regional built across all 73 parks in the same period of time. That, the picture that Jim showed of Briones and the illegal trails and this, in red, that is a shocking indictment of East Bay. I understand people building illegal trails. I'm disgusted by it. I lead hikes for the Sierra Club. I've got hikes planned right now for Tyler Ranch, 3 hikes for Mission Peak, and hikes for Vargas Plateau. So I'm taking people on a regular basis. I do not have an issue with mountain bikers. I'm a bike leader for the Sierra Club. The deal is that the trails and the use of trails is really, really important, that people maintain an awareness of what's going on around them. When I saw the 3 e-bikers on top of Snow Ridge on last weekend, the issue was that, one of them carried an extra set of batteries so they could go further. The one gentleman told me that he hit all 18 miles inside the park. I'll guarantee the gentleman I was with, who was also a Sierra Club hiker, and when we finished the ascent to the top of the mountain, we were dead. It is a 2,000-foot climb. It is a tough hike. We met people on the hill that had actually traversed. They had gone down into some of the other new trails that have been built, and they said 14 to 40. We were dead. I'm getting feedback from court. Thank
Someone
you.
had to mute.
That's okay. We did not go across all 18 miles of trail hiking. It's just too much distance for a hiker to cover in one day. I've got double damage in both knees. I can't do it. The bikers did it. So that's the issue that I see with the the biking community that you're going to face.
Morton, you
Sorry
got to
about
stay
that.
muted, please.
So the other thing that I'm seeing is, the East Bay, the two subjects that did not come up in the user group meetings with the PAC was, underlining habitat destruction, which Jim just mentioned. And the second is the liability faced by East Bay Regional. So if you've got mountain bikers on e-bikes that are going long distances and they have physical problems, you're going to have liabilities that are not addressed. And you need to make sure that you have the insurance coverage to actually protect East Bay Regional, because a gentleman of my age on a bike out in the middle of nowhere that comes close to dying, my family's going to come after you. All right. And I'm trying to be really, really clear about this. Liability is an issue for the Park District, and I don't think it's addressed. I do search and rescue for Alameda County. I do search and rescue for Alameda County. This is an issue that we're seeing across park and recreational areas all over the country. All right. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Roy.
Thank you.
Appreciate your input.
Thank you. And next is Kelly Abreu. You can please unmute.
Okay, thank you. So it seemed like we had a trail strategy plan, and part of that might be trail maintenance. Measurement and management of the trails. Where, for example, at Mission Peak yesterday and earlier this morning, it was basically too wet to hike or bike up and down that ranch road, the main trail, because too muddy. Then, of course, the other trail, the restored trail, that's already started falling off the hill 5 years ago, and it still hasn't been really restored. We all know which one that is. That's the Scarface trail, the Scarface rerouted trail. And then we have the after hours usage at these trails, where we have a contingent of critics who claim that there is so much horrible after hours usage. Of course, their claims are not supported by any data, because the data that is there shows that after hours usage at 4 a.m. is minimal. So, we're getting these, people who are just inventing stories, wild, crazy, claims about, high crime rates or whatever that aren't supported by the facts. And then let's look at some of those slides that we just saw. Remember at the beginning of this presentation, there was a slide of Mission Peak. It was beautiful. It looked like a crucifix out there at the front, but that's my, it's we're not at Easter yet, so let's. But the other picture was Shadow Cliffs. What's going on there at Shadow Cliffs? Why don't we have a trails strategy plan or maintenance plan? The main problem at Shadow Cliffs is not that there are crowds of people there today. It's that there ain't no water there today. That's supposed to be a water park. So what is the, for example, a recovery and repair plan to restore water to the thing? Maybe we could find somebody over there at the Zone 7 Water Agency who knows about these things, and we could start thinking about how to do that. How to bring Shadow Cliffs back so it's actually usable as a park, the way it was intended to be built. So a lot of the things that are happening here with trails is not just the users. It's your agency is responsible for maintaining these trails, and you're not doing it in a lot of places, especially where there's very high usage, where there's a lot of traffic, and you have to maintain it, in a different way. And people, when you get crowds of people bypassing the trails in the interest of not going through mud, you call that bootlegging, and I would call that, trying to not drown in mud. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu. Next is Elizabeth Hudson. You can please unmute now. You have 3 minutes.
Um, Hello, I'm Elizabeth Hudson, and first want to say thank you very much for this plan. And I particularly appreciated so many of the director's comments and sensitivity to the users that are not showing up anymore. And so I had some prepared comments, but you basically addressed most of what I was going to say in your comments. So I'll just do a little bit of ad-libbing here. One is the planning is so important, and doing a district-wide planning is also important, because what happens in one park affects the other parks. Users move based on, you know, whatever is happening. So you need to look at things district-wide and how they're going to balance out. As an equestrian, I have a lot of friends who do not ride Briones anymore because it's been taken over by the bicycles. And so they won't ride on the weekend, or they're very careful about the days they pick. I think that the board is sensitive to that, so details can be at a further discussion. Some of the comments about the park district being welcoming and inclusive, and staff should reflect that. I could not agree more. Please hire some equestrians on your staff so that the equestrian interests are understood, the equestrian experience is understood. So please hire some equestrians. Enforcement, I believe education is good. Enforcement at some point becomes necessary, and lack of any consequence for bad behavior is well known by the people who behave badly. Consider technology. Walnut Creek Open Space does use some cameras, and that's able to let them monitor and even go visit the people who are building fires or doing whatever they shouldn't be doing. So think about creative use of technology. Perhaps we need registration on bicycles. Again, more discussion there, but please be creative. And yes, use the volunteers. I am on the Volunteer Trail Safety Patrol. I am one of the Mounted Patrol volunteers. Please use us. Give us a little bit more authority, because some people pay attention to our shirt, vest, jacket. Other people know that we have no authority. So at least let us take names, take pictures, do something to help the park district protect their assets and protect everyone's enjoyable use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hudson.
Thank you for your service to us.
Okay.
Next is Jim Hansen.
Thank you, members of the board. This has been a very interesting and lively discussion. And yes, a lot of the points and questions you raised really hit on a lot of the issues that we've been seeing and also bringing to you. I think I want to just highlight a few things. One is, as Board Member Corbett said, this is complex. And I think it really gets to the fact of why a district, some level of planning that takes into the complexity of any particular issue, and this includes Briones and Wildcat. And in that, I want to just say that the experience of all the different users, we've been really hearing a lot about mountain bikes and illegal trails and the addition of a whole new category of bikes with new people on them. And believe me, a lot of the folks will be new to this. There may not have been the old rider who was willing to go all the way uphill. And hats off to the people who would do that. But please remember, and I'll just speak for the hikers, the people who walk, the families who are out there, and Director Lane touched on this. We're kind of maybe seem in the background, but as you know, we're probably 4/5 of what the 25 million visitors per year. And there's an experience that we need in all this. And this is what I think is why the need for planning. So that the ability to refresh, to kind of get away from some of the stress of Bay Area living, to really immerse in nature is available, and that experience which we all know we want to keep. And how are we going to do that? So I think, again, it gets back to planning for each user group, including, we haven't heard a lot about people with physical disabilities. We haven't really heard much about, we heard a little bit about equestrians today. These are important parts of how we not only get volunteers, but how we keep people in the parks. As a number of you have said, if they're not working, people are going to go somewhere else. So I would just point out to the preserving the user experience, and that's a reason for looking at planning, and also the critters that can't speak. We hear about resource protection, but as we know, if we look at trail impacts, and particularly when they're fragmented or cut through hills in multiple places, we're looking at the wildlife that we love, the bird species that need to nest and need quiet, leaving too. And that shows up in a lot of the research literature. So this is not just about a special species, it's about that whole system of life that we want to keep vital in our parks. So I want to thank you for embarking on this. I want to encourage, none of us want a big 2,000-page plan that takes 8 years. That doesn't do anybody good, but we do need data and strategies related to it around the specific issues you've been talking about, and looking at new alternatives, which could include, as we've said in our letter, and in our Rodney Ranch proposal, having a separate trail for families, having a wider trail with a bench.
Mr. Hanson, you're past your time. Can you please wrap it up now?
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Amelia Marshall.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Amelia Marshall, member of the Volunteer Trail Safety Patrol, past participant in the Trail User Working Group, and speaking today on behalf of California State Horsemen's Association, Region 5, Alameda and Contra Costa counties. The theme of my remarks today is, what should public engagement like for the Park District? As reflected in the letter to the board from our joint stakeholders group, we're encouraged that the district is pursuing a comprehensive trails policy, but the devil's in the details. That's why we strongly support ongoing trail user engagement. It seems that there is fear in some quarters that public engagement merely leads to delays in opening new parks and other types of progress. We think this idea misses the point. What should public engagement look like? Should it be a Zoom meeting before the PAC, as was done this past Monday, to satisfy the CEQA requirement for a public hearing on the opening of Las Trampas? Should it be like with the McCosker process, where the people were invited to 3 separate meetings? We sat around at round tables. Staff members interpreted what they thought public members were saying and wrote notes on Post-it notes and on whiteboards, and somehow missed the point there. That was clearly not adequate. It was not a satisfactory public engagement process. Conveying the lived experience of those who actually use the trails is an elusive goal. You've got to iterate between the top-down design for the trails and the granular understanding that the users bring. Let me give you one specific example. Mr. O'Connor and others may be familiar with this, but it's just really crucial. In Briones, there's a particular point on the Alhambra Creek Trail where it intersects with the bottom of the user-created illegal bootleg Hank and Frank Trail, much beloved to the cyclist community. This is the spot where the bicycles come hurtling down the hill into the populated area. And this is where Kimberly Burke was thrown from her horse and badly injured her back. So the riders from the Briones Horse Center and the surrounding barns see that spot coming up and they dismount as they approach it because they don't want to get injured too. So I'm wondering, are park planners are aware of this? Do the 7 staff people who work in Briones, are they aware of it? The Briones Horse Center was the site of a community meeting from all riders from all around last March. And there we had a really good conversation, and it was agreed that we would be happy to license our horses if the bicyclists could have their bicycles licensed, so there'd be some accountability for the bad actors. In conclusion, as trail users, we appreciate that the planning staff and managers are making a good faith effort to listen to us. We can see that Mr. O'Connor has expanded the pilot area to encompass the standard equestrian loop where most people
Minutes
do
have
ride their
passed.
horses. So in order to get an accurate picture, it's necessary to have both that top-down design and the detailed understanding. Thank you very much for all you do for trail safety.
Thank you, Amelia. And I know the pilot project actually envisions a barrier at the bottom of Hank and Frank so that the bikes will have to stop. They won't be able to just barrel in onto Alhambra Creek Trail.
People will love that.
Jim has incorporated that into the pilot project.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Kevin Smallman? You have 3 minutes. You can unmute now. Mr. Smallman, we cannot hear you. Are you planning to provide a comment at this time? We're going to move on to
Let's go to Josh. Yeah.
Josh Sennenfeld.
Hey there. Thanks very much for the opportunity and for this really excellent discussion this afternoon. I really enjoyed it and appreciated it. And my name is Josh Sonnenfeld. I'm an independent consultant here representing Bicycle Trails Council of East Bay, California States Horsemen's Association, Sierra Moon Valley Horsemen's Association, Sierra Club, and the California Native Plant Society, who submitted a letter to you all on the board and staff yesterday in support of comprehensive regional trails plan for East Bay Parks, also known as the Trail Master Plan. There's different names we've got out there. I was actually took advantage of some of this time to go for a walk outside while I was listening over the past number of hours, and just so much appreciating what an incredible region we live in. And as the sun is going down out here in Concord, and just we're so fortunate to live here, and so fortunate to have East Bay Parks and such dedicated staff and board members committed to our park district. I won't go through all the points on the letter. It's getting late. We've all been here for a while, but I just want to emphasize a few things. That really we have around the value of the opportunity for comprehensive regional trails plan. The intention is to bring together all these challenges that we've been talking about today and address them at a holistic district-wide level. This is a practice that's used successfully in other park districts, as Deputy General Manager O'Connor spoke to, in terms of Santa Clara County Parks, Marin County Parks, and other locations. And I want to be really clear that, in the conversations we've had between our organizations who have very different views on how to best manage our trails, this proposal is not in any way intended to be an effort to slow down any of the important work that the park district is doing to open up new trails and to explore new practices, but really a complementary tool that recognizes that some of these challenges are really best analyzed and solved at a regional level as opposed to a park by park level. For example, identifying areas of concentrated recreation versus concentrated conservation, where there's really important biological needs and habitats and species. Having clear visions for how are we meeting the needs and desired recreational experiences of the different trail user groups, with sort of this phrase that we've been kicking around that not every user is appropriate for every trail, but there is a place for everyone in East Bay Parks. And so how can we plan that out at a regional level? Really taking a close look at outdoor equity, which is something that is top of mind for all of us and should be, in terms of which communities are really underserved, which communities should we really be prioritizing new trail access for. I can tell you just anecdotally, moving from Walnut Creek to Concord over the past couple of years, it's a huge difference just crossing over that one border. And thankfully, we've got Thurgood Marshall Regional Park coming, which is going to change that, at least for a big section of the town. But what are other communities around our region that really need more trails access, and how can we make sure to get them that access to nature as soon as possible?
3 minutes
How are we
have
tackling the
passed.
permitted trail challenge and strategies for dealing with overcrowding? So, so much important work's happening that's underway right now, and we see this process as an opportunity to engage the public, build consensus and support so that we can actually move quicker in addressing these challenges. That's the hope. So we're here to help. And again, thank you all for all your incredible work. And yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sonnenfeld. Next is Kevin Smallman. Please unmute.
My apologies for the technical issues on my first go around. Members of the board, East Bay Regional Park staff, my name is Kevin Smallman. I first and foremost would like to thank all of you for all the work that you're doing. Hearing today the sheer lift that the park staff is doing to try and bring recreation opportunities to fruition is heartfelt. Like, I feel your passion in the parks, and I really appreciate the time and energy that you guys put into trying to make opportunities for folks like myself to enjoy the park. I'm a resident of San Leandro, and I'm a teacher in Fremont, and yes, I'm a cyclist. I love riding my bike. During the week, the best way for me to ride my bike is by BARTing into work. I'm fortunate enough that works, and taking a ride home. Most days that's on the road, but on occasion I have some spirit in those legs, and I head into Dry Creek and connect over through 5 canyons to Lake Chabot. Hearing today about the good news of the Niles to Garin connector being added in a pretty short timeline, and hearing about how Pleasanton Ridge will be gaining more trails, all are really positives. I appreciate hearing all those things. Looking at these timelines and what it takes to bring them to fruition, I think about the Pleasanton Ridge Master Plan and how we're now 12, 15 years into the process of seeing those trails come to shovel hit in the dirt. Looking at the projects on the horizon, hearing about Launch Trompus and some of the other large additions to the park district, I wonder, where is our next 10 to 15 mile trail system addition in the next 10 to 15 years? It's taking us 10 to 15 years to add trails into the pipeline and get them built. Where's the next one? And I'm not hearing that. Board of directors, I would encourage you to find whatever pennies are in between the couch cushions and throw them towards natural surface trails. Everybody on this meeting is talking about them. We love them. We want more of them. They seem like a pretty good bang for your buck in comparison to paved trails. I'm not taking away from paved trails. I love the Bay Trail from San Leandro to the San Mateo Bridge. Just saying, would love to have some more narrow natural surface trails to be used. President Coffey, I want you to take a moment to think about your comment about Joaquin Miller Park. Joaquin Miller Park is a gem amongst the East Bay that is gracious enough to allow cyclists to be a part of the narrow trail conversation. Yes, there's a high concentration of bikes in that park, and that's largely due to the East Bay Regional Parks not providing adequate access in and amongst the park district. There are cyclists in every town. But when I think about the places where I want to go ride my bicycle, there are very few opportunities. Spread those opportunities out. Make it so folks in Hayward and Fremont have a place to ride locally. Make it so kids like me back in the day, who had Lake Chabot in my backyard, was able to just ride up to the lake, do a lap around, and enjoy nature without needing my parents to drive me there. Where's that opportunity for folks in other regions of the East Bay? Thank you for your time. I appreciate you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of public comment, and I'd like you to bring us back to the topic at hand and where we're going from here, Jim.
Thank you, President Coffey. And thank you all for your patience and your time. And this is an important conversation. As I said at the very beginning, and where are we going next? That's the question. So the vision that I have for where we're going to go next is, and I've talked to Jim Landreth about this, is for us as staff to create a strategic plan. That's different than our master plan, which is our master policy document. And what a strategic plan means is that we look at what actions can we take in terms of how the organization is organized, staffing, different programs, things like the Briones pilot project, and what can we put together as a plan to start addressing some of these issues over multiple years. And so that's what we're going to work on, is a trails program strategic plan, which looks at all the aspects from planning and development and maintenance and enforcement and management of trails on a day-to-day basis, and come up with strategies to start addressing some of these really important issues. So that's what we'll do. And I'm hoping we can get something together for your next cycle of study sessions that will lead into the 24 budget. So that's where I'm hoping we can pull something together to be part of that process and actually do some budget requests for 24 and start things moving along. And in the meantime, the Briones pilot project is hopefully moving forward in the spring, and that'll give us a chance to try out some management strategies for managing trail use on our current trail system and see how those things work. And also it has a big component of both restoration and user engagement. So I think that's an important program, and I'm looking forward to getting that moving.
So how is that vision track with or is distinct from the calls we've received from the Sierra Club and now this coalition that Josh is staffing of a master plan? Norman wrote an article about a year ago calling on us to specifically master plan for trails and develop a master plan for trails, and his letter repeats that, and Josh's letter as well. So where is your vision tracking with that, or how is it distinct from that?
Well, here's what I'd say. We're still having an internal discussion about what trails master planning means. Now, I have some experience with this from my prior employment in Santa Clara County, where they did that at a park level basis. They did a park-wide look at their trails at a certain park. The first one was Almond and Quicksilver Park in South San Jose. And they look at that completely, doing a user interface, a process, and then implement the recommendations from that plan. So we're still discussing about what that might mean here. And there's another aspect of that, which I think that's been alluded to by the speakers and the letters you received, is where we look at regionally, how do we satisfy the various user needs, both within our park system and beyond, including other park systems. So I think that's another level of planning that could occur. They could occur simultaneously. So I think we're going to go back as a staff and say, okay, one of the first things we need to look at is that what do we mean by trails master planning, and what might that look like here at the Park District? So that will be part of this planning process, the strategic plan, to look at what is trails master planning, what do we think we can do, and what do we want to do first. So we're still working on that concept, but it's out there, and that's our comments on it now and what our perception of it is. But we're going to hone that down with a specific recommendation.
Okay, so it's still out there, and it's what exactly how your vision tracks with just being a master planning process is still being developed or thought about.
It'll be an element of that entire plan. We have to look at maintenance. There's all kinds of aspects that we've heard today, all these different aspects of trail. As Director Corbett said, this is a complex issue.
Yeah, and frankly, I always viewed this as something that would be done hand in hand with master planning generally, and our 2013 plan will have met its shelf life next year. And I understand that because of the shift in emphasis that the whole organization was subject to during the pandemic and the height of it, maybe that's not happening in that 10-year period that we usually envision. And so, I can be convinced that this could be addressed as a separate process. Brian has told me that the elements in the existing master plan, the trail elements, which are fairly extensive, but they're within each of the elements of the master plan generally. So it's not a focused master plan. And Brian has assured me that it's a real master planning for trails in a system as large as ours is going to be much more complex and comprehensive than in our existing 2013 plan. So I'm getting convinced of this, and with the assurances we're getting that this is not envisioned as something that will slow down our existing LUP developments and existing trail. That's really important to me, because Amelia was talking about processes that we followed. I think the public input process, and as we continue to go through trail development process out at the Roddy Ranch Golf Course, that's just been a supremely well done public input process. That is, that I've participated in closely and seen how it evolved the project. And I'm really proud of what we did there and what we've continued to do with that park and opening the first phase of Deer Valley in that way. It's been a great process. And I wouldn't want to, set aside trail development as we master plan. So I've been assured both by our stakeholders and by staff that isn't going to happen. So I'm here to be convinced that we could just go ahead and pursue a trails master plan if that's where you folks end up directing us.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that many of the goals and policies that exist in our current master plan align with some of the comments that have been made today. So I think there's a great alignment with that at the high level of policy. But what we're going to work on is, the on the ground actions and what do we need to address some of these issues.
So we're not nearly as off schedule as I thought we were going to be earlier this afternoon. So I think we all did pretty well. And, we're at 5 o'clock. Any other closing from board members? I don't see any.
Great job, everyone.
Looking at the Zoom, I don't see Ann or Dennis. Dennis, we're okay. Then I think it's thumbs up on a very good session, and we appreciate all your efforts, your efforts over the course of the past year, Jim, and that of your colleagues in really getting a handle on the, as I said earlier, the panoply of these issues and bringing us progress. And we're going to put those, 15 years of planning behind us, those days, because we really got to address this issue as you've outlined it. And I appreciate that it's going to be refined and keep going over the course of next year.
Okay.
Anything?
All right.
What?
Meeting adjourned.
We're done with public comment. We're done with any more management input board. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.